it's a little bit of light relief for the bloke in the field. He's getting pissed off and wet and hungry and dirty and cold and all
Generations.
that. Generations, yeah, that was part of their way of handling things. And whilst we thought they were, sly buggers, I think they were survivors. That was one of the biggest challenges I think you faced, was you think, shit, I've left a wife and brand new kid at home. I'm bloody back here, and for why?
So I understand you grew up on a farm. Whereabouts was it?
In Edithburgh in South Australia, which is on York Peninsula, the actual peninsula shaped like a foot.
What did your parents think about your decision to join the army?
I don't really... I think they talked it over. I know they did. But they didn't really... Dad was quite happy, I think. And Mum had a friend who had been in the army herself during the Second World War and was a sergeant in signals or something, and right behind this, the army's bloody good for you kids, it'll taught you out, which still goes on nowadays, except. And so I think she swayed Mum in the end, and she signed the papers, and that was it.
Did they have to actually sign the papers?
Had to sign.
Because you're about 18.
I think it was under 21.
Right.
I'm not sure, absolutely sure, whether it was 18 or 21. But I know they had to give consent. So I'm presuming it was 21 because I was over 18.
So how long did you have back home before they ended up bringing you into the barracks in Adelaide?
I don't remember really. Very short period of time, I think.
And is it Adelaide that the barracks are in?
Keswick, well, yes, in Adelaide, yeah. No, I don't remember how long. I don't think it was very long at all, because I sort of left the bank and pretty much a fortnight later I was up and gone.
So what were your first impressions of Kapooka?
Fairly hectic, I suppose. They shove equipment at you that doesn't fit, that you've never seen before. Your greens are either too big or too small, just like you hear about. Your hat doesn't fit. Nothing fits really. I think that's why they do it. So that you've got to work out, you swap it amongst yourselves, or you go back to the Q store where they issue this stuff, and you've got to swap it, and then you start the process of learning how to wear this stuff and polish it, and all very well. Later on you realise that it's all part of the military plan to brainwash you. I think they'd be the masters at brainwashing, subtle brainwashing. You don't realise it until all of a sudden you're all marching in a straight line and all doing the same thing and thinking how good you are, and later on in life you think, they bloody brainwashed us. But it's a necessary thing. So you've got to be able to do that to function as a fighting unit, and I suppose that's what it's all about in the end. Whether doesn't matter what corps you are, you still got to aim towards a goal. And the only way to get you to do that is to brainwash you.
What would the daily routine have been?
Up early, 6 o'clock I suppose was reveille, and it would get played over loudspeakers around the camp from memory, and as soon as you heard that you leaped out of bed, and I'm not really sure if we did PT, physical training, first thing in the morning or not. I suppose it varied. It wasn't a set routine. It would depend on what you're doing that day. If you're going to the range, well, you would get up and dress accordingly, or if you're going out to the parade ground, you would dress accordingly for that, or if you're having classroom lectures, you would dress for that. You would find out there in all barracks there would be a notice board, and then that notice board would be your week's activities and a broad brush of your week's activities, and then a daily activity sheet which dictated what lessons you did, where you went and what you did. You know, grenade throwing, swimming, there was swimming tests to do, flotation, where you wrapped your gear up in a plastic sheet basically called a hoochie and swam across the swimming pool. They didn't make you go in a river. I don't even know if there is a river in Wagga. I was showing my ignorance of geography here, but I don't remember seeing a river. Well, it must have been, I suppose. We weren't that far from Falls Creek. You're pretty much confined to barracks for the first half of your training until you had your 4-day break, which I mentioned before. Then after that, you're allowed to go to the boozer, as everyone got to know it as, because that's an army thing. So everyone, if you're in the army, you don't call it the canteen, you got to call it the boozer. But you never got a chance to. Well, I wasn't a drinker anyway, so it wasn't a pressing thing to build up and have a beer or anything.
How long was the training?
3 months.
Where were you allocated to? Take a sip of water, Craig.
I was allocated to signals, and
Why had you been allocated to signals?
well, they go through how well you did on your recruit training, whether you did well in your your academic side of it or your physical side of it, or and I guess my education was fairly good, so signals requires a fair bit of paperwork and that sort of thing. So I'm presuming that's why I went to signals. It's not where I wanted to go, because you're all fired up. You know, you've had a gun and this thing, I'll be in infantry, I'll be a killer. And pardon me, that's what you want to do. So, but not everyone gets to be that. I mean, someone's got to be a cook, someone's got to be a SIG, someone's got to be an ordnance. You've still got to have your killers. Someone's got to be an artillery or tanks or whatever. And so depending on where the greatest need is at the time is where people go. Your aptitude, of course, comes into it, but chances are, if they're needing a lot of infantry blokes, they will. But that was in '66, so we hadn't really had, looking back on it, a great attrition rate from Vietnam. So there was, and I don't think we had upped the ante with the battalions in Vietnam. We weren't up to 3 battalions in Vietnam, so didn't probably really need as many infantry as what I'd hoped. Who knows whether it was a good thing or not, hindsight. So I went to signals. We went to Ingleburn in New South Wales, where we were housed at the barracks there. Then they put you through aptitude tests to see how good you'll be in signals. And I was allocated to an operator's job, which involved Morse code and all that sort of thing, which I knew nothing about, totally ignorant. And they sent us to East Hills, to the Marconi School of Wireless, which was a civilian school. So from memory, I think we wore civvies to it. I'm not sure, but we were mixed in with civilians, and there was our course, and we learnt Morse code to 10 words a minute there, I think, and various other Q and Z signals they're called. So QSA, you would have to learn that, and what that means is signal strength. So instead of sending signal strength in Morse code, which is say 15 letters, you would say QSA, and meant that. It's I suppose, a low grade code. And you learned all that sort of stuff, and you had to pass a test on that. But it was good there for the simple fact that we would be allowed to go and get morning tea at a shop, and it wasn't military at all. We got bused there, mixed with civilians, and we had civilian instructors who there was no military in them at all. They weren't yelling at you, and it's a bit hard, disconcerting after getting yelled at for 3 months and following the military way to go to a civilian school.
How was the course completed?
Down there we learnt the radios we were to use, which, as it turns out, by the time we got to Vietnam they changed them all, so you had to relearn them. But we continued on and got to 18 words a minute Morse, learnt voice procedure, the correct way to talk on a radio without compromising yourself and giving away information, and learned all sorts of security, and I don't remember ever using any codes or anything. We never taught that to my knowledge. And generally finished off our course. There was nothing really exciting happened down at Balcombe that I can remember.
What's that, Balcombe?
In those days there was a school of signals, Army, and the Army Apprentice School. Just up the road from that was a rack barracks, where Women's Royal Australian Army Corps barracks, where I think they learnt cooking. I'm not really sure. But the blokes used to, I suppose, go and try, because Balcombe's right out by itself. There's not much. Mount Martha, I don't know if you know the Victorian.
Not really.
Anyway, I think there was very few women. I don't remember too many women. We never had any women on our course, but the ones that were there were fairly popular, and used to go and try and visit the barracks, and they'd cranky old, I don't know what she was really, used to kick you all out and look after her girls like a mother, old mother.
Of course, was that in Collie?
Parts of it were. The initial part was done at Swanbourne. We had a set of old Second World War barracks on the northwestern side of the actual Swanbourne camp, Campbell Barracks, that we occupied, and part of that was that's where we slept, and we had showered, that sort of thing, and part of our duties was to keep the fire going of a night. So on top of your workload during the day, you had to maintain the fire of a night. Otherwise, cold showers in the morning doesn't turn the rest of your mates on a great deal, and vice versa. Yes, it was done, and the physical training side of it was carried out around Swanbourne, from where we were butchied up, if you like. You would run to breakfast, run to lunch, run to tea, run everywhere, and depending how bad you were, with the bigger the load you carried, and part of the course was communications, and that's where we caught up on some of the lessons that we didn't know, or that we'd missed or weren't too sure of. We caught up on that because everyone on the course had to know a certain amount of voice procedure and how to operate a radio in case they got lost on a navigation or something, or got themselves into strife and required to be able to operate the radio for safety, to get them, if there was an injury amongst the patrol, they had to be able to get them out.
Are these just all different codes and procedures?
Just basic voice procedure, that you knew how to put a battery into the radio and turn it on and talk. It really wouldn't matter if you didn't follow the procedures, especially if it's a safety issue. You just had to be able talk on the radio, but everyone had to know that, the same as everyone had to know how to map read, everyone had to know how to do every little part of a patrol. You became patrol commander, the patrol 2IC, the not so much a medic, I suppose. We learnt basic medical, like from memory, what to do for snake bite, which we didn't have to worry too much about when we did it. It was July and there's not too many snakes around Swanbourne or later on in Collie in July.
What was the reason that you were transferred to Collie as part of the course?
Well, it was jungle training because there was already a squadron in Vietnam, plus there'd been 2 in Malaya prior to that, and it was aimed at, we knew our next deployment was going to be in the jungle. So the nearest thing to tropical jungle in Perth is Collie. And Collie in the winter is bloody cold. But that was that was the training area as well, the army training area at the time. So that was the nearest thing to jungle you could get. So
was it just like the density of the vegetation?
Yes, yeah, it's different type of jungle to tropical, of course, but it nevertheless had was dense in parts and sparse in others, as Vietnam turned out to be. Different temperatures, that's all. And down there, part of our training, we just had to do a river crossing the whole course. So myself and another bloke were being fairly good swimmers, and that's something I omitted. I did have a bronze certificate, so we didn't do competitive swimming, but we did do swimming classes, and himself and he and myself swam a small rope over the Collie River, and it is freezing and fairly fast flowing, and later on there was blokes lost, whether they had heart attacks or what, I don't know, but it was just one of those things you accepted. So we swam a small rope over together, and then they hauled a larger rope over, which we tied off to a tree, and then the blokes would come over on that rope. But in the meantime, it took something like 2 or 3 hours, and we got out of the river with our gear, and because we had to float our gear over, being the first across, you had to cart your rifle and your pack and what have you with you. The others could use the rope and to get across, but we couldn't. So when you got out the other side, everything was soaking bloody wet, and these hoochies that you wrap your gear in leaked. I mean, there's nothing that you could say was actually waterproof at Collie. Everything, you slept cold and wet and miserable, and anyway, I can remember sitting there shivering for about 2.5 hours and willing these blokes, come on you buggers, get across here, we'll die, but we didn't, and that was part of it. The rest of it was, as I say, you learnt to do every facet of a patrol in as much as we could do. Some things I find I remember back and think, well, if it wasn't for that bloke getting me through, I wouldn't have, because we had what they called a sneaker course, and the idea of a sneaker course is you go through a wooded area, and what they put, and you've got live ammunition. Most of our stuff was done with live ammunition, which by today's standards were frowned upon, but it was just the way it was, and added realism, I suppose, and taught you safety and to think before you did things, because you were firing off something that would rip through a small tree. And what they would do is put out different targets, like a target of a man, and it would pop out from behind a tree, this sort of thing, and you had to wander through the sneaker course or patrol through the sneaker course and get 10 targets, and you expected to get a 10 out of 10, I think. Anyway, whether I didn't listen or it hadn't been explained properly to me, I wandered through the sneaker course and I never shot anything. And anyway, we get out the other end and they said, well, why didn't you shoot? Did you see anything? I said, yes, there was a target on that tree. There was something at that tree and there's something over there. And I said, why didn't you shoot them? Oh, did I have to shoot them? And I thought you just had to find them. And anyway, so I had to go back and consequently do that bit again.
It's kind of embarrassing, really, isn't it?
Well, it was, yes. I thought, oh, that must be the only... I wondered why everyone was shooting, and I wasn't. But anyway, obviously that was forgiven. So I went through and I got the 10 the next time. But, or whatever it was, I'm not sure what it was. But that was just sort of shows how far behind we were in some things. But anyway.
Did the other blokes who were going through the course help you out?
Yes, yeah, they were good. We had, people say what a great attrition rate they had on their courses. Well, we had, I suppose, one of the highest rates of people passing. I don't know if because we're all fairly young, and the infantry blokes were good with us. They after about 3 or 4 days, and of course you compete, and they worked out that we really weren't much of a bloody threat to them passing the course because we didn't know zip. So from then on, they helped us, and vice versa with the communication side of it that we knew. We helped them, the ones that weren't going all that well. So it became a bit of a helping type course, I suppose, rather than I'm going to get in and get more marks than you, therefore I'll pass and you won't.
So the competitiveness came down because you could actually swap skills?
Yes, and for whatever particular reason, I don't know, we seem to pass those skills on to each other and help each other through. Because one of your final tests was a 9-mile run, and after we'd been through the collie exercise, funny thing that happened down there, this Chris Jennison, our patrol commander, we had the final phase, I think, was a 3 or 4 day patrol, and in that you had to get into a place, do a reconnaissance on a camp, do a drawing, and a part of that 3 or 4 days you were the patrol commander, you were the 2IC, you swap jobs as you went along, and he assessed you as such. And anyway, we were supposed to be there for 4 days, and come day, and there was no talking, it was all field signals and this sort of thing, and come night 3, Chris said, all right, we'll sit down, we'll light a fire, and because it was freezing, we were wet the whole time. The army gear is far, far better now, but ours was pretty bloody basic. And so you were wet the whole time, your boots were full of water, and you never got a chance to dry out. Well, he said, oh, well, righto, gather some wood, we'll light a fire and have a fire and sit down and talk about what you did in the last 3 or 4 days. And he in those days, Chris liked a beer. He been on the wagon for about 15 or 16 years now, but at the time, he liked a quiet one, so he knew the collie area fairly well. So he said, I'll be back, you get the fire going. Anyway, he comes back for, half a dozen bottles of beer or something. It was King Browns in those days. And anyway, we sit down, and he says, oh, we'll sit down, have a beer, we'll go over what we've done. Anyway, a couple of sips out of a bottle when you've been running around for 4 weeks, and you think, oh, he's lightheaded and that. And he said, righto, well, he went over everything we'd done, and he said, we'll get picked up in the morning. And someone said, no, Sarge, we don't get picked up for another day. We haven't done the camp on recce on the camp yet. Shit, he said, put that bloody fire out, put the bottles out, give them to me, and so we had to continue on for a further day. He'd buggered it up. But nevertheless, that was straight back to work, and he was the boss, and he went on and showed us how to do that sort of stuff. But what I'm saying about the course working well together, we shot off on our 9-miler when we came back here. We had part of your physical training was to do your sit-ups and push-ups and chin-ups, and your 9-miler in full gear in 90 minutes, and a 2-miler in full gear in 16 minutes, I think. And on the 9-miler, there was quite a few of the blokes failed. Out of, I suppose, the first 4 was one of our officers. There was Curly Clark, there was myself, this cook. I've never seen a bloke with a better set of lungs than him. He was about bloody 5'2", stocky build, and could run all day. When you're forcing yourself to break through the old bloody pain barrier, there he is running along, yarp, 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 never shut up. I can't think of his name now. He was a national service. Crying out loud, shut up! He's driving everyone mad. He was doing it easy, and there's us just about dead. Anyway, we the blokes that passed it were allowed to run the next one in PT gear. You still had to do it with the blokes who didn't pass. They were given another shot at it. But we had to run it in PT gear. So what happened on that stage was, the next time, the following morning or however long it was, they decided between runs was the staff would run it with you, but they would run it in PT gear as well. But when they got out of sight, the blokes that were doing it hard, we would carry their rifle or carry their webbing and someone would go look out for the staff. And as soon as they'd say, staff coming, or whatever it was, you'd give them back their gear, and they'd run along, and then when the staff would disappear, you'd grab their weapon, and that's how we got them through. So
that's a good example of mateship, really.
Yeah, well, that's why I think we had such quite a high pass rate on the course. And further to that, most of the blokes that I went through that Carter course with, we're still friends. There's quite a lot here, and some of them, like Curly, I did both tours of Vietnam with, and we just stayed mates. We don't live in each other's pockets, but as soon as you get together, I suppose like any military thing, the years just fall away, and off you go like you're 19 and bulletproof again till next day.
When you were doing the Carter course, were you actually on rations?
In the Swanbond area where we're doing your theoretical side of it, we're eating out the mess, same as everyone else. In Collie, yes, well, we only did it here and in Collie. In Collie we're on rations, yes. And that was another thing too, that we're on hard rations. Well, I'd never eaten a ration before, so it's a matter of working out how to do it, because there's a way to do it, a way to ration your rations, and so that was all brand new as well. We had all these tins of bully beef and cement biscuits, and you're trying to work out what to carry, what not to carry, because it's all a weight, becomes a weight and space type exercise too with the rations. You can't just throw in 4 days rations in big packs and then with the plastic still on them. You've got to be able to get to them, because it all creates noise. So you've got to have it so that you can open a tin get at the tin and open it without having to open a plastic bag and drop coffee and this horrible milk and stuff all over the place. And yeah, so very steep learning curve.
Did you have to carry more equipment because you're in signals?
Yes, yeah, we had to carry these radios, which old A510, which were in 2 separate pouches that sat on the front of your hips, and they were joined in the centre by a big multi-pair cable type thing, and they were also HF radios, high frequency radios. And but we were allowed to use voice rather than Morse code. And yes, we had to carry them, plus spare batteries, which I think, I reckon we had to carry them ourselves. What generally happened in the patrol in Vietnam later was the batteries would be split up amongst the patrol, because the SIG was required to carry pretty much the same amount as the infantry blokes, plus your radio. But by that stage we'd had much smaller radios, and well, not much smaller, but smaller. And of course they were open to the weather pretty much too. They were the whole Second World War thing, and came in a box about 6 foot long, full of all sorts of weird and wonderful things, because whilst we've been signals, we hadn't come across these radios. They were relics even then, and so we had to learn to get to work them as well as whatever else we had to do.
Do you have one-to-one training on that?
Yes, I think we did. Well, you would have a couple of staff, signal staff, would go on the carders to man the safety link, and the communications from Swanbourne to where we were in Collie, because traffic messages still had to get to and from, because you still had your administrative type stuff. You just didn't go down there and as a cocoon. You still had to have contact with the outside world. And I think they, one of the two blokes that was down there showed us how the radios work, how they went together, because they were crystal controlled type thing. So you had to put a transmit crystal in and a receive crystal and know where they went and tune them, and it was all. It's not like nowadays you press a button and it goes and tunes to whatever frequency you put in. It was all done by ear. You had to pick your 0 beat, as they call it, where it went up the other side, so you had to get the bottom, and that was the actual frequency. Far easier nowadays.
So when you came back to the Swanbourne barracks and you've done your runs and you've passed, is there some sort of a passing out parade?
No, not then. After you got your results, and I got to admit I was happy with the pass. I knew I was compared with the infantry blokes, no great shakes. So a pass, I was quite happy with the pass. From there, we went to by train to. Here we go. Williamtown in New South Wales, where the army, well, I'm not sure what it was called. It was para school, the parachute school. In those days, it was run by the Air Force, and with army instructors. But the head Sherang, I think, was Air Force. Why they associate Air Force with parachuting, I don't know, but I would imagine because they own the planes. And so we had to go there. We went by train with to Kalgoorlie on one track, then changed trains because it was a different. To Kalgoorlie was owned by state. From Kalgoorlie on was National Railways or something, so it was a different track. And they were all sit up shotgun trains, really. And of course, you got to Kalgoorlie, tried to smuggle as much grog on the train as you could, whether you wanted it or not. That was just you did that. And I think we went straight through to Melbourne, because I remember we were in Melbourne on a Sunday and went down to the Naval Club. I don't remember ever liking the Navy, and never have. But you went there because that was open, and that's something else you did, and tried to get as much grog into you and take as much as you could to get up to, I suppose, Sydney, and then to Williamtown itself. And then you did the parachute course, which consisted of 8 jumps. You had to complete 8 jumps to get your wings. And that was a fairly intensive sort of course, because you had to learn to what to do in the aircraft, what to do, well, prior to the aircraft, how to fit your parachute and make sure it was, the packers' cards were right and they hadn't given you a dummy chute or something like that. You learnt that. Then what you did in the aircraft, we did caribou jumps, and 4 caribou jumps and 4 Hercules jumps. Some with equipment and some without, because you did your first 2, I think, without equipment, so that you got some sort of an idea actually what was going to happen. And then you learnt that once your chute had opened, what you did in the air to avoid collisions with other parachutists, so you didn't get tied up and deflate your chutes and this sort of thing. And then once you got to land, how you would land, whether you were coming in, because bearing in mind what you see on TV nowadays is the big, the free fall chutes which you can put onto the oval at Subi like they do, and with no trouble at all. We just had chutes that were designed to get you en masse from the aircraft to the ground, so there was no hope of steering them, and especially from 1,000 feet, when you jumped out at 1,000 feet, they were designed to open and put you on the ground, nothing more. Well, that's all they did. But you had, if you looked like colliding with someone, you learnt collision drills so you didn't go through their rigging lines and get tied up together and deflate your chutes and deflate your ego as well. And then when you with those chutes, you could come in any which way but loose. You could come in backwards, sideways, frontwards, but so you had to learn how to roll without hurting yourself. So yes, you had no control of it, or very little control. I mean, you couldn't just say, well, I'm going to land there, because it'd be like winning the lotto. You'd had about as much chance. But as I said, they were just designed to get you there, so you would learn how to roll from whichever way you were going. And the first 2 jumps were clean fatigue, as they call it, no equipment. And the first one you don't remember, or I'm blowed if I did it. It was just all this, am I going to go out the back of this bloody aircraft or aren't I? And luckily in the middle of what they call a stick, that's a heap of blokes. So once the first one starts going and the bloke out the back's having a panic, you got no choice. So out you go. And I don't remember the first one at all, but I do remember the second one, because you know what's going to happen. So I think that's when you think, oh, I don't know if I like this much. But luckily you'd land on the Salt Ash DZ up there, which is sand, so it's not so bad. Later on you hurt yourself a bit, but not really on that course. But I do remember walking, my second jump was, there was a chute below me, and you're supposed to learn to steer away, but as I said, you can't really steer them. So I can remember coming down, once you go over the top of another parachutist, he's already taken your air. So you start to come down a little bit faster than what he is. And I thought, well, what am I going to do here? So, and I remember walking off it, and it was like walking on a mattress, because you just push yourself off the top of the thing, because you don't know what else to do. This is your second jump, for heaven's sake. You're not a sky god or anything. And you design. They teach you that well, that you react probably instinctively, or make up the odd thing as you go through. And just went over and did that and landed, and it was fine. And the motto, in actual fact, is knowledge dispels fear, and I reckon that's pretty right too. They pump it into you repetitiously until you react instinctively, which is what it's all about. And then I think we then learn to you pack your equipment, pack your rifle on your equipment and all this sort of thing, and then you go on and do your 2 equipment jumps, I think, out of the Caribou, And when it's the same situation, except when you get out of the caribou, you lower your equipment 15 feet below you on a rope, and that hits the ground before you do, and gives you space so you move away from that equipment and don't land on it and break your ankle or your leg or something else. And then you do the same thing, different set of procedures for a Hercules, but the same sort of mind-numbing. Am I going to do this? And you go through, and I think the last jump was a night jump with equipment. So then which is not so bad if it's a fairly calm night, because you hear your equipment hit and you think, I'm only 15 feet from it. Bang! You still go over, you still go crash. If you get up and you haven't broken anything, it's a good landing.
So after the parachute course, what happened to you next?
We went straight to New Guinea because they were short of signals blokes for 2 Squadron, which was the next squadron going up to Vietnam. And so off we went.
Literally straight as you came back to the barracks at
No,
SAS?
we didn't come back here at all.
Oh, okay.
We left straight from Williamtown, busted or flew to Mascot or something, then on the plane and off to Port Moresby.
Was this an exciting thing to be a part of, or would you have liked a bit more time off?
In hindsight, I would have liked a bit more training before going to Vietnam on the infantry side of it. But this didn't come out till we got to Vietnam, and it was too late then. So we went up there, went to Port Moresby by civilian air, then we went from there to Lae in a caribou, I think. And we were met at Lae Airport and taken out to the Lae Showgrounds where 2 Squadron already were. And we joined the signals troop and started our training for our actual SAS type training, because their methods of communication were all high frequency radio plus Morse, and that was encoded, so we had to learn what went on in the radio room, learn all the radios and the procedures. Basically what we learnt going through our signals course were proven roughly right, but not what SAS used, so we had to learn that, which we did over the following 6 weeks.
The team that you're working with there, what are these blokes like?
Good, yeah. I still maintain contact with some of them. One of them was my best man, I was his best man. We sort of hit it off pretty much straight away and still maintain contact.
Were you both as green as each other?
Oh, he'd been there about a week longer than me. No, 2 or 3 months longer than me, so he had a bit of a lead-up exercises to this main one. So, and they all showed us what was going on, and you relied on, well, they taught us pretty well, I guess, yeah.
Did you feel like you had sufficient training within that 6 weeks?
Well, that's only something you can work out in hindsight. I think it was intensive and I think taught to us well. After we came back from New Guinea, we did a few more exercises, mainly with our type of communicating.
The same sort that you were doing in New Guinea?
Same sort as what we did in New Guinea, yeah. But once again using collie, which is, although it was getting into summer then, so it wasn't too bad except it was dry.
What was going on with Vietnam at the time?
We had a squadron over there. It was 1 squadron at the time. There was our squadron training, this 2 Squadron were training to go to Vietnam. 3 Squadron, which were the first squadron up in Vietnam, were back here going through advanced courses, recruiting people, And that was it. There was, I can't think what, anyway, the squadron that ran the courses was made up of blokes that had done a tour, were proficient in roping or parachuting or whatever, and they would run the courses for our squadron that was going to Vietnam and anything that followed behind.
Would you get to talk to any of these fellows who came back from Vietnam?
Yes, yeah, we did, but mostly that was over a beer in the canteen, which was not real flash. But you'd get to talk to them and get stories and tall tales and true, I suppose.
About what year was this?
That was 67, late 67. Then we went on leave and pre-embarkation leave, and came back over here, did pretty much a few more little communications exercises, because we didn't get back from leave, I don't suppose, till towards the end of January. And we left for Vietnam in mid-February, I think.
Well, what perspective of the war did you have when you left the country? When you left Australia, that is?
None whatsoever, really, that I can remember. Never saw it on TV. We didn't have a TV. You never consciously sat down and listened to it on the radio. You listened to 6IX or 6PR or... No, 6PR has never been much. But one of those stations, 6PM I think at the time was all the rage. And you listened to the music, and you didn't sit there and study what was going on in Quang Tri or bloody the DMZ or any of that sort of stuff. You were just off to Vietnam. You were a soldier and you're a young bloke, and that's what you did. So
why did you think you were going?
Why? Because I'd signed up in the army, and that's where I was going. I didn't sign up to go to Vietnam. I was in the army, and if I had to go to Vietnam, I went. Not hindsight. I would question it on behalf of my grandson that it was the right thing to do, but my old man never said anything. No one that I know of that ilk or that era ever said, "Oh, you shouldn't be going up there." "Oh, good on you, son," you know, if they did say anything. Mostly they didn't say anything. So it was just something you did, and off you went. With your mates. Probably to a degree like they did with, in the First World War. Embark at Albany and off you go to bloody places unseen, and when you get there you say, "Shit, what did I do that for?" But it's too late, and you do your job and put it behind you.
Whereabouts did you embark?
We left by plane from Perth Airport. We went up on a Qantas civilian flight, 707. Prior to going, we were issued with a X amount of money to go and buy a civilian white shirt, and so when we got to Singapore, we disembarked there, went into the to the holding area, I suppose, the lounge or whatever. But prior to getting out the aircraft, we took our military shirt off, put our white shirt on with our military pants and military boots, and in we went, because we weren't supposed to go through Singapore to get to Vietnam. That would have seen as an act of hostility on Singapore's behalf. So we were civilians, for all it's worth. I mean, I know it's a political bloody way around something, but that's what we did. Stayed over, hopped back on the aircraft, put our army shirt on, the white shirt back in the bag, and went on into Ton Son Nhut.
What was your first impression of Ton Son Nhut?
Planes and stuff everywhere. Military planes in hangars and bloody aircraft going all over the place. But I don't remember a great deal of that, to be quite honest. It was just something you landed there and they processed you, and you hopped on a Caribou, I think it was, to go to Nui Dat, and we're told about our safety and all that sort of thing in Australia, and there was no seats. You sat on the floor and put a strap across you and away you went, and hopped out the back. Whereas safety went out the door, especially with the Americans. They were pretty, by our standards, I mean, they were marvellous flyers and all that sort of thing, but their safety and that from our regimented safety was a bit of an eye-opener. And we landed at Nui Dat and were trucked up to the hill, as we had. I don't know if you know the setup, but SAS were in the centre of the Nui Dat Task Force area on what was known as SAS Hill, and we were there from 67 through to the end in 71. We stayed there, and that was totally isolated from everyone else. We had our own transport and stuff, and picked up our own rations from wherever and our own ammunition and all that sort of thing, and up the hill, and no one else. We were responsible for our own perimeter defence, own communications, own power. We didn't rely on anything from anywhere else.
So was SAS Hill in the middle of the task force?
Pretty much in the Nui Dat itself was just a hill. Well, that's what Nui Dat means, I think, little hill or something. But we had the hill, which instead of Nui, the whole area was just known as Nui Dat, which was the task force headquarters area. And yeah, in the middle of that was us, and then people pretty much right around us are on three quarters of our hill. Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty secure spot.
Yes, I suppose it was from our point of view. But being on a hill, you're prone to rocket and mortar attacks and that sort of thing. But I never had any in the 2 years I was there. And but they did get, blokes got wounded. They did, other squadrons got rocketed and mortared and what have you. But yes, it was a fairly secure spot. And it wasn't worth their while to try and take the whole of Task Force out, because it would have just lost too many people. The NVA, or Viet Cong, because to get to the hill and overrun it, you're wide open to the Yanks. Well, our artillery, B-52 strikes, the Puff the Magic Dragon and all those helicopter gunships and all that sort of thing. So it wasn't a feasible thing to try and knock us out, and it wasn't really worth, I don't suppose, even pinging the odd rocket in, other than a I don't know, keep you on your toes type stuff, keep you guessing.
So you thought the defences of the task force area were pretty
appropriate? They were, yeah, pretty adequate, yeah, because each unit, I think, had to maintain their own area of defence. And yeah, I thought they were pretty adequate. Especially we had American 155s in amongst us, and access to, as I said, most of the Yanks. The areas around us, the artillery overlapped. That was the idea behind it. So there was nowhere you couldn't put an artillery shell. So provided the artillery doesn't get run over, you've got some sort of backup from somewhere.
When you arrived, were you greeted in the task force area, or not until you reached SAS Hill?
No, we went straight up to SAS Hill, and greeted by the blokes that were either stayed behind or were our advance party, because it sent up people earlier to take over from the people that were vacating. So you could, do a handover takeover, as in how many pens are in the bloody drawer and how many sheets of paper, this sort of thing. And how many radios we had. And I think it was it's like coincidences that we'd only been there a few days, I suppose, and we had to do a cordon and search. That is, you go and look around your area, and we were wandering around down on one of the roads, and I hear this Bramley. And I look up, and it was a bloke I went to school with. So, small world.
Was this a area outside of the task force?
Outside the task force area, yeah. They were just coming back in off an operation, and we were wandering around aimlessly, I suppose. And yeah, they came past, and it was a bit of a coincidence, really, going to school with him, and having him there.
Was he a regular soldier?
Yep.
Did the
Yes,
blokes
he was.
off SAS Hill come, or the SAS soldiers, come down and mix much with the regular soldiers in the...
Those that you knew, I suppose. Initially, I think you went to see people you knew, but after a while, you become insular, I think. You stay in, if that's the word. You stay, you think, oh, back of that, I can't bother going down, because they just want to know what you've been doing, and you think, oh, can I be really bothered? And so you think, oh, no, bugger it, I won't. So there was a few blokes up there I knew. But no, I never sort of fraternised with them, if you like.
Because they would have been pretty curious what you're up to, wouldn't they?
I suppose, yeah, but it wasn't any big deal, you know. They were just going around looking for people, which is what your job is, reporting on it, and then getting out the area, and then the infantry blokes, or they call in a bomb strike or artillery strike or whatever. If it's a bunker system that's looks like it's too secure, they might soften it up with B-52s, and then send a patrol back in to see if they've done it, carry out a bomb damage assessment to see if they've done anything, any major damage to it or not. And if they haven't, well, they might pull you out and send in a company of infantry or something to try and do something about it. But no, there's no clandestine type sneak into a village and snatch people. That's a bit of TV, really.
But what was the SAS role, like in relationship to the task force?
Well, the eyes and ears of the task force is what you've probably heard this a few times here. Was to go out, you're given an area of responsibility, and go in there and search that area and determine what's in there, what enemy activity is in there, what civilian activity is in there. There's not supposed to be civilian activity in these places, but there was. I mean, we know that we're allowed to go in there, and probably the Americans and our people know, but you can't tell a woodcutter that. What's he know? He's got to go and cut some wood, so off he goes and cuts his bit of wood. But pretty much, yeah, what was in an AA was considered enemy. But the job was to go and see what's in there, report on it. This was, say, the first half of our tour, if you like. I've never understood that tour, but I can't think of a better word, so everyone uses it, so I will. You would. Most of our patrols were reconnaissance patrols, but after a few different contacts and that sort of thing, and ambushes, they learnt that we're better in some instances as a harassing ambush type, used in an ambush type role, and that became pretty much the norm for the last half of, actually taking the fight to the enemy rather than shoot and scatter, as they used to say. It's a shoot and scatter. So infantry used to call us, the battalions. But then, so the last half of the tour we used in that role, and quite successfully. Our squadron, I was 2 squadron both times, so I'm quite pro 2 squadron. It's like playing for the Dockers or something, if you know, that sort of thing. We had the highest number of body count kills, which, when it's all said and done, is what you're there for. people say, oh, you shouldn't be proud of that, but then that's what you went for. And I won't say I'm proud of it, but it's certainly something we achieved that none of the other squadrons did.
What is that figure?
150, I think, might be 170, I'm not sure, which is, when it's all said and done, that's not bad for 100 blokes, considering you're not everyone goes to the bush. So, and that's confirmed, like body count, not yes, I think I got one. You know, that they were discounted, you weren't allowed to have that, so.
Well, how is a body confirmed?
Well, when you actually see them, or your patrol says, yes, I mean, you could say, well, I got 10, there was only one there, but somewhere along the track when you have your debrief, that's, someone's going to put their foot in it, aren't they? So, and you debrief by our intelligence staff, or depending on what they found, if it was a bag full of documents that give the intelligence staff at headquarters can use, well, then you were down and interrogated by them. So you couldn't, they're experts at the game, unlike what you see that the Yanks are doing at the moment. They, somewhere along the line, slip up, so you'd have to be pretty right with what you said. But yes, I suppose to a degree it was left to.
Well, how did you operate on the reconnaissance patrols and or later the ambush patrols?
Well, mostly it was 5-man patrol. You were given an area of operations to work in. You went and did a reconnaissance of that aircraft, AO by air, and generally the whole patrol would go out if they could, but at the least, the patrol commander and the 2IC, patrol 2IC would go out, check the area, and he would look for tracks in the area, likely places to go in and out of, to be landed, and an area where you could go to get pulled back out again if something went wrong. Water in the area, if there was any, for the dry season, because that was a problem. All those sorts of things. Any enemy you saw while you're in there, you could see them moving around, not all the time. And that's what they would look for. And then they would work out where you would go in, your LZ, your landing zone for when you went in, and you would go into that by helicopter, sometimes by armoured personnel carrier, depending how close it was to roads and this sort of thing.
How were you inserted by helicopter?
Fast. Yeah, just go in. You would have generally 5 helicopters. One would be your Albatross lead, which was the one that ran the insertion. You would have 2 gunships, and which were Yank gunships when we were first there, because we didn't have our own, and 2 slicks, or the helicopters carrying the blokes, depending on whether it was a 5-man or a 10-man patrol, and you would quite often both helicopters would go in. One would actually land and drop the blokes off, and the other would be used as a decoy or whatever. But they'd go in, and X amount of distance before the actual landing zone, they would drop to treetop height and go in at about 110, 120 knots, which is dodging old dead trees, and quite exhilarating really. And then just flare you onto the ground, and you'd hop out, and that'd be the start of the patrol. But quite often you got out at about 6 or 8 feet, and when you're coming down with 60 or 70 kilos of weight on your back, and you don't actually, you tread out into 6 foot of air, that hurts when you land, which happened quite often.
What was the procedure once you're on the ground?
Well, you'd go into an LUP, lie-up position, and maintaining all-round observation, and just listen. and see if there was anyone around, because the Viet Cong got to know. I suppose you follow a pattern, you've got to, but they would get to know, and quite often waiting on the LZ. If they've seen, they got to know how we operated just the same as we got to know how they operated. Sometimes they'd be waiting there on the LZ, well then you'd have to belt off and find another one, or or get the gunships in to keep their heads down while they sent back the helicopter to pick you up.
Did you have a couple of hot insertions?
Not hot insertions, no, I didn't. No. Hot outs, what do you call them? Exfiltrations.
What happened in those situations?
Got caught. So you, as in, got sprung.
What sort of patrol had you been on, and how did it
Well, that
end?
was just a recce patrol, and we had a contact and shot through, and the only way to go was out into the open. Well, sparse jungle, and it was getting towards last light, and managed to get communications to our relay station, because we couldn't always get back to Nui Dat. The antennas and stuff weren't real flash in those days, and so we put out relays and managed to get through to one of them, and with that 3-letter code word I mentioned before. And then once that happened, they just ring through to task force, fire up the choppers, and come out to your last known good reference. And from there we had UHF radios that we were able to talk to the choppers, and then you just identify yourself as smoke, and or they run the thing then, the helicopters. They just ask you to throw smoke, and then they say, well, what, I see green, roger, we're throwing green smoke. So, because if they say throw red smoke, and you got someone else on the net, they throw red smoke. So the helicopter, you throw whatever smoke you say, the chances are that if there's enemy there listening in, you're not going to both pick red. And then you'd just tell them how close the enemy were, where you wanted fire laid down if you needed it. The gunships would come in and do the suppressing fire, as they called it, and the slicks would come in and pick you up.
And what, you'd be dodging enemy fire?
Well, I wasn't, because I didn't get close enough at that particular time. But yes, a lot of them were. The choppers were receiving incoming fire, and each helicopter, I can't remember if it was first in the tour, but certainly second time, they had twin M60s mounted either side with an Air Force gunner. He was also firing from the slick that you were about to get in. So there's quite a bit of fire going down, and you've got to be a brave man to put your head up when twin M60s are firing around the place. Yeah.
Were there many casualties amongst the SAS?
We had one, first tour. As in KIA, you mean? Yeah, we had one which we did ourselves. That was a mix-up. Almost at the end of the tour, actually. Well, it's just one of those unfortunate things. He was Aboriginal, and they'd been doing a reconnaissance on the track, and there was enemy activity, I think, but that they'd heard, instead of, normally you go out along a given path, and unless you've arranged to come back some other way, you come back in on that. For some reason he didn't, and when he popped his head up, because he didn't wear cam paint or anything, didn't have to, and of course they got off 3 rounds, and before they realised, and it's too late. But that sort of hits home a bit because you've lived with them for 10 months at that stage. And, yeah.
tragic that that one statistic was a friendly fire.
Yeah, friendly fire for what friendly fires? I don't think it's that friendly if you're dead, eh? Is it? But however, yes. Yes, it was unfortunate, but the potential for that to happen is in any patrol. So the fact that it didn't happen very often is shows the quality of training, I suppose, or the quality of the bloke in that he can, rather than just fire off willy-nilly, and that they really pick their targets, I guess. And second tour we had the same thing, but a bigger patrol, and they're harder to maintain control over, and we lost a bloke the second time through friendly fire, as you say. But that was the only two we lost now. 2 tours. Ooh.
Can you describe the kind of preparation you do for a patrol, and then perhaps just ask you about some of the basics?
Well, you're given a warning order that your patrol is required to go to such and such an area. Through intelligence reports, they say, well, we suspect that such and such are out there, or that no one's out there, but we want to find out what has been in that area. And in our particular case, we were seconded to a patrol if they considered that the area you're going into was would require a level of signals expertise above what the patrol signaller would do. But just to clear that up, the patrol signallers were marvellous. I don't think we're any better than them. In fact, I would bet we were no better than them. But we would probably be faster, send and receive and that sort of thing, but in as much as being a better patrol member, no. We would be faster encoding and decoding, but that's about where it ends. They had the on the ground knowledge, so they were better than what we were in that regard.
Sorry, when were you required because of your expertise? What factors were involved?
Well, the further away from further away from Nui Dat you got, the harder communications were, of course. And the rationale behind sending a corps of SIG on a patrol was that you probably know a bit more about antenna theory and that sort of thing, but I never found that to be so, because if you're in thick jungle, doesn't matter who you are, you can only put up a certain amount of antenna. Our only advantage over them then came back down to our encoding knowledge and our send and receive knowledge, and our knowledge of what goes on back at the base. So we can, basically, you're talking to someone you know and a system you know, so you can you're talking into your home, if you like, so you know exactly what's going on. So when you send it through, you know what's going to happen or what is happening, and that made you a little bit quicker, but not on the ground, no. But anyway, where did we get to?
Whereabouts were you briefed before a patrol?
Yeah, we had our own briefing at the squadron headquarters, and you would be briefed by the operations officer and the intelligence people as to where you're going, what you're doing, and the patrol commander would also give you a briefing as to your order in the patrol, what you're expected to do, what you're expected to come across, what you would do in any given situation. As in, you had a contact, you would you would follow these procedures, or you'd do exactly what he says. And more so in our case, because if a patrols work together, it's like a good footy team. You know what the other bloke's going to do. But when you're taking out a novice like me, you've got to, that gives them added responsibility in that they've got to keep an eye on what you're likely or not likely to do.
Am I correct in understanding that you'll be working in different teams all the time because you're a signaller?
yes, we did, from a corps signals point of view, but from an infantry signaller's point of view, they were allocated the same patrol. The same patrol stayed together pretty much for the 12 months. Yeah, but ours, we swapped over. Never went out the same patrol twice. Oh, well, yeah, I did. But
how welcoming were the blokes on that patrol with a new bloke, if you like?
well, other than have you in the patrol in some situation they haven't seen you in, they've seen you around the camp all the time. You've listened to their infantry regimental signaller. You've debriefed them, talked to them, you drink with them, you work with them. So there was no hassles really. Unless of course you didn't measure up. Well, then you found out about it. But other than that, no, you didn't. There was no problem. And sometimes they're quite happy to have you along, especially in the latter part of our first tour, because it was full on. No doubt about it. We were flat out, and blokes were just starting to fall by the wayside through the workload, illness, as in feet playing up, injuries, and it got to the stage where myself and this Curly Clark that I mentioned once before, out of a patrol of 5 people, we made up two of the 5, and we were both SIGs. And I went out as a SIG, and Curly went out as as one of the riflemen on the patrol. So,
what kind of injuries and illnesses were cropping up?
Well, Blake's got malaria. The injuries, if you back injuries through carrying such heavy loads, especially during the dry season, where if you're going out for 5 days, you carried 5 days worth of water. Now that's a lot of weight. Plus you've got your ammunition, your grenades, your claymore mines. We never got resupplied, as the battalions would get resupplied. We never got resupplied. When we went out, you carried enough to get you through that 5 days or 7 days or whatever. And during the wet season, that was pretty a hell of a weight. And blokes would come down with heat exhaustion and heat stroke, that sort of thing.
Well, once you were briefed before a patrol, what was the procedure to get out there?
We would then go from Nui Dat by vehicle down to, we had our own helipad, but sometimes we left from there, I guess. But we would go down to Task Force headquarters, and the patrol commander would go in for a briefing to IC with the 9 Squadron helicopter people, if it was going to be a helicopter insert. They would brief them on procedures, if a helicopter went down or whatever, what to do, and most of them had been through this 1,000 times, so it was just, how you going, Brian? Oh, not bad, Bill. I guess that's what they got up to. I wasn't privy to that. And then they'd say, well, we got to be on the ground at such and such a time, let's go, and they'd crank up, as they called it, and you'd hop in and away you'd go.
Any rituals?
Well, I didn't have any. I was too silly, I suppose. No, as in, what do you mean, sort of pat the helicopter or...
Yeah, something like that.
I suppose blokes did. I don't know.
You described how you'd be inserted by a helicopter. What about when you're inserted by an APC?
Well, generally what they do is go out to an area by road or however, and yes, with the APCs, they would have periodic stops for morning tea and all that sort of stuff that armoured people do. And if we were going to be inserted like that, they would go through an area. They could keep moving along, and we'd just run out the back and go off patrolling. Or they could stop, make a heap of noise, like they're having their morning tea and all that sort of stuff. Our patrol would go out, sit in the bush, they'd go and leave the patrol there. So there was at least 2 ways of being inserted by APC. And
Is it actually dangerous to get inserted by an APC?
well, it is. You used to probably have to run there was decoy things done like that so that anyone in the area didn't really know if they dropped someone off or if they were even dropping anyone off. You'd just have 2 lots and make noise and
Is that an advantage, sort of getting in there and making noise?
well, it concentrates the VC attention to that spot. So if you stay there for a while, drop a patrol off, the patrol moves away from that area. What the VC would do after the APCs had moved, they would come in and check the area out and see if they could pick up any stray cigarette butts, I suppose, or whatever. They would check that area out, but you stay there, make a noise, make yourself known, they know you're there. The patrollers then got, given half an hour to move away, right away from the area. And then if the VC are in the area, they go and check out where the APCs were and find no one.
Sorry, can I just pause for a second? Carry on.
Well, that was it really.
What would actually be your role then once this whole APC thing got it?
Well, I would just be the signaller on the patrol, same as if you went in by helicopter or however you went in. That would be my task, or was my task.
Was it more difficult doing it with the APC?
Well, you didn't have to talk to the APCs. We just got picked up at Nui Dat or wherever and sat in them out of sight. Went off to wherever the insertion point was going to be and either got out while it was moving along or, as I've just explained, get out while it's sitting there, clear out and let them go and do their thing.
How long would one of those patrols take?
Well, it depends on the task you were given, and of course if you ran across any enemy. But generally they were 5 days, and some days if you're doing a reconnaissance, an ambush patrol, you could sit there for 7. I've sat there for 7, and the most dangerous thing we had was a monitor lizard try to come through the camp in the middle of the bloody night. They'd make a hell of a racket, and you can hear them come right up to you and they sniff or poke their tongue out or something, I suppose, and decide you're either too big or ugly to eat, and off they go. But that was, and we sat there for 7 days and got bored stiff. And during the day, I on the communication side of it, I went and put up a decent dipole antenna, and then during the night established nighttime communications back to Nui Dat, which was something that you couldn't do. Well, it was never done. I managed to do it because of boredom, really. You had nothing else to do, and after a while you know if something's likely to be around your area. But they wouldn't let us come in. I'm talking the second tour now, I've jumped a tour. Wouldn't let us come in, we just had to sit there. So you sit there and you think, what am I going to do? So you'd work out something to do, and I finished up talking half the night on the Morse back to the operator at Nui Dat, well, I knew who he was, and it was just something to do. But that was, as far as I know, no one's established nighttime communications because there was no need to do so. And well, you couldn't do so if you had VC around. You can't stumble around the dark putting up an antenna. You can't see what you're doing for starters. You make too much noise. And
I was thinking, yes, establishing an antenna, so you're making noise, it's in the middle of the night, you can't see what you're doing, but you still decide to do this out of boredom?
No, I did it. I put the antenna up during the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I put the antenna up during the day, and and fiddled around at night because, well, it was boredom. Well, one of the blokes on the patrol made himself a nice little covered in hutchie type area because he was bored as well.
What do you talk about when you're bored like that?
Well, you didn't talk. That's
Well, I
why
mean,
you're
on
bored.
the communication.
Oh, well, I just said, how the comms had, and he would say there QSA 5, that was one of those Q signals, QRK 5, which is signal strength and readability are both as high as you can get. And then what's going on back there? How'd the footy go? Because we had a radio tuned into 6WF here, one of the receivers, and we would get the footy results from here and broadcast them out to the patrols at the end, provided they weren't in strife and were able to receive, and we just broadcast the footy results that they wanted to hear, and they weren't just local footy, it was VFL or rugby, whatever it was. The bloke would come up and say, I need to know such and such a score. And you'd arrange that before they went to the bush, so when come Saturday and you had all the scores in, after you'd finished your communications, this was a no-no, you weren't supposed to do it. After your formal communications were finished, you'd just say PDWP, which means Perth defeated West Perth, and just put that on the end of the message. Oh, that's just one for, could be EP, D, EF, whatever. So you just do that, and that's a little bit of light relief for the bloke in the field. He's getting pissed off and wet and hungry and dirty and cold. And
Is it hard to operate out there when you're wet, dirty, cold, pissed off?
yeah, because especially during the wet season, you're trying to write in these pads, and basically it's rice paper that is what they're made out of, and it doesn't take much of a drop of water going down your sleeve when you're trying to write in pencil, because you never use biro would run, so it was all done in pencil and didn't take much of a drip down your sleeve to wreck your message or wet your pad or something. So it was very difficult. You had to cover yourself so that no water got in, and then of course it would be dark, and you would under that, and you would have a problem with light, so you had to let enough light in to be able to encode and decode, and yeah, hard yakka.
So you got like a piece of plastic over your head,
Yeah, to keep out the rain.
and you're trying to see through natural light.
Yes, yeah,
It's hard.
very hard. And of course, if the jungle's quite dense, the less amount of light, and that brings into time constraints into everything too, because the patrol commander's got to pull you up, or pull the patrol up X amount of time before you're sked, because we had anything up to a dozen patrols reporting twice a day, and 2 frequencies to do it on, and therefore you would have to be spot on your time, otherwise it would affect the patrol that follows you up, and we're only because of those time constraints given quarter of an hour to do it in, and or they were given quarter of an hour to do it in, so it becomes
With all the
quite
patrols.
tight. Yes, and they had to report twice a day, which is something that, in hindsight, I don't think was very smart.
Why is that?
Well, it ties the patrol up too much. Instead of doing their job, they're looking at half their time out there is reporting something. But if they don't get around and look, they got nothing to report. But which we changed at one stage to they would come up and just send NTR, come up and nothing to report. So they would get off, and then if you had a patrol that got into contact, they took priority on the air. So you would have another patrol trying to send a normal message. We just have to tell him to wait out, and until you sorted out the patrol that had the contact, got rid of him. Then you could look at this bloke just sending a normal reporting type message, bearing in mind he's been sitting on his bum waiting. So, but never ever got sorted out that they should just report when they got something to say, or every couple of days, for instance, you know, if they, so as you know they're still alive. But I think that's come along now. I don't know any of their procedures anymore, but we really tied them up, and especially this ATLP thing. It was a secret code. In actual fact, probably can't be broken even with your computers nowadays, but it provided long-term security for any information we send in, but there was nothing that we found that had any need for long-term security. A camp report or something like that. The Viet Cong didn't have enough communications on the ground to intercept what we were doing, and even if they did, they couldn't crack what we did send. And if we'd have gone to a lower grade of code and they found out, they did manage to crack it and find out what we'd sent, a camp report or such and such, they didn't have the expertise to act on that. They couldn't send out a helicopter and blow the patrol away. Didn't have them. They couldn't put in a bomb strike. Didn't have it. So this is something I've worked out in hindsight, but there was no need for all this wasted time, which we did waste time with all this. I mean, it was secure and all that, but no need for it.
Is what you've described a relay patrol when you?
No, relay. That's just a straight patrol to base type operation.
I was just thinking, because there were so many sort of reports coming in, that would be the relay aspect of it. Clearly not.
No, that confused you even more.
That's all right. Tell me what a relay patrol
Well, with
is.
the relays, as I said, we would have our communications in the first part of our tour in '68 weren't all that good because we didn't have good antennas, probably antennas were the key. We didn't have very good antennas. So they were good enough for when we were first there, say in '67 and earlier, because the patrols operated in fairly close proximity to Nui Dat itself. So you didn't need a great array of antennas in the receive side of things in Nui Dat. But as the area around Nui Dat got more secure, the patrols were sent further and further out into the in Phuoc Tuy province, and therefore the communications were required to be better. But we're still using the same antennas. No hope of changing them to any great degree, other than making them newer or, you know, changing the wire or anything. They didn't actually change the receive capabilities all that much.
Is that because of the height thing that they?
Yes, without getting into an antenna lesson. With high frequency communications, you rely on the ionosphere, which is above the Earth, and HF bounces a signal off that back down to the Earth, and depending on your frequency, depends on the angle that goes in, and therefore you get what's known as a skip distance. So it'll go up like that, down like that, and in the middle there's nothing to say you're going to receive anything. So with that, the further out you got, and the limited frequencies we had, your communications became more difficult. So it was change the antennas, which wasn't an option, or put someone out closer to the patrols, to the area they were operating in, and hope that if they couldn't get back to Nui Dat, they would be able to talk to someone closer into them, because the output of our sets was 5 or 6 watts. The patrol radios, which is by today's standards, I mean, I think you got handheld things that are better than that. But nevertheless, so they put relays out, and the idea was two two blokes would go out on those with, and you would live with the American advisors that were attached to the ARVN, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the South Vietnamese soldiers, and you would live with them and maintain daylight listening watch for the patrols, because, as I said, nighttime communications were an impossibility apart from the physical aspect. The frequency we had wouldn't work anyway unless you had some sort of decent antenna, which I'd done previously, or I did later on.
With the two blokes, is it one South Vietnamese guy and one of you guys?
No, it'd be our blokes. There would be two of our blokes go out and live with the Americans, and there was generally about 5 of them, and they lived inside a village or a hamlet, which were the Republic of South Vietnam soldiers, and well, that's it. Our two blokes would then, during daylight hours, listen out for the patrols. The patrol's idea was to talk to Nui Dat. If they couldn't, and we could hear them, where we had the relays, we had VHF or voice communications to Nui Dat, which were proved. They worked all the time, day and night, well, 90% of the time. They blew it. One of the artillery blew one of the antennas down when it fired over the roof of this place, and which it shouldn't have, and blew the antenna down and put holes through the roof of this hut and 3 blokes' beds and wounded a couple of blokes. Anyway, so if we could hear the patrols, if we were on a relay, we could hear the patrols, we would then take their message, send it by voice to Nui Dat, who would decode the message, send the information they wanted to go and give it to the operations staff, as I said before with that, and they would say, well, yes, we need to talk to them, and no, we don't. If they did, they would encode the message at Nui Dat, send it to us at the relay station, and we would send it to the patrol. So once again, that added time to the communications, but at that stage there was no other better way to do it. And but what that did to our manning was, if we had 3 relays out, which we did at times, out of a troop of, say, 12, say 14 actual operators, we would have 6 on the ground, and so that would leave 8 back at Nui Dat to maintain 24-hour communications, plus still do all the tasks that were required in the squadron. So it became, you worked.
If you're out in one of those relay teams, would you have to sit and just listen constantly for?
Yes. That's where the technicians came in. They would butcher the gear so that you would use a speaker off one set and wire it into the other set we had, so that you could have, rather than sit with just a little earphone that came with the sets in your ear all the time, you could actually hear it on a speaker, only a little speaker, but that saved you sitting there with your earphone in your ear for 12 or 14 hours, depending on the time of year.
So you could go mad just sitting there, trying to listen for a sound.
We quite often did. Well, not go mad. But
Just...
you could go mad, yeah. That's why you drank, I think, because you had to. Anyway.
So the speaker system helped the situation?
Well, yes, it saved you being tied to sitting right alongside the radio, the radio there and the earphone in your ear, for that 12 hours or whatever.
Would you take it in turns to listen? Or?
Yes, but sometimes you would have 2 sets going, so then you both were sitting there. But it gave me an insight into the Americans and the way they interact between each other. There's particular places, as Won Mok. We went out there and set up our everything. And
this is another relay?
This is another relay, yeah. And they had a black American captain in charge, and the blokes he had under him, they were all sergeants, because they had to have a certain rank to deal with the Vietnamese. They had to, you couldn't have a baggy ass like me telling the Vietnamese what to do. They had to be at least a rank of sergeant. And anyway, I remember this bloke. He was a medic sergeant, and the captain told him, that he had to do such and such, and he just wouldn't do it. And the way our army operates, that if you got told to do something, whether you wanted to or not, you did it. But there was open hostility because he was a black captain and this was a white sergeant, he just didn't do it. And he wasn't going to do it. And then one of the other sergeants backed him up, and there we are. We had a corporal or a lance corporal and me who was the lowest of the low. You saw you didn't know where to look. You thought, well, this just doesn't happen in our army, and why are they doing this? But that's just the way they operate. That's why they have their black battalions, and because they just won't. And it still goes on today. Blokes I've talked to at Swanbourne says, well, Dad, even though they're Australians, they're not welcome in the black messes and that sort of thing. But anyway, that was just an aside, I suppose. But it was an eye-opener to us.
Did you actually realise that it was a racial issue at the time?
No. I thought, well, fancy saying that to a captain. No, never gave it a bloody thought. No, I didn't. It was only later on you look back and you think, well, yeah, I suppose that was a race thing, not that the sergeant thought the captain was incompetent. It was because he seemed a nice enough bloke to us. Anyway. And
it's an interesting comment on, both of our societies. Obviously, we're going through the same sort of a Western culture mechanism, and you don't understand why they're doing what they're doing because it's completely going over your head that they have a racial issue.
No, never.
Were those troops actually some sort of an elite?
No, they were just MACV teams, I think. Military Assistance Command Vietnam. They came from all parts of the army, I think. That wasn't something I looked into. I mean, I thought, well, they're there and he's a captain. I don't understand any of their badges. He could have been airborne or, an ice cream maker for all I knew. They were just there. But they didn't really mix with the Vietnamese. It was something which what happened? Dunny got blown up. And they were self-contained in a wooden hut in amongst, and the living conditions for the locals was bloody shocking. They lived about 3 or 4 families in a bunker type thing made of logs and mud. They would have 4 families to the left as you looked at one single entrance, 4 families to the left, 2 to the right. The back of this bunker setup formed part of the outside perimeter. So they were on, apart from barbed wire, the bunker that these families lived in was the first place you're going to put a rocket. And so the entrance that faced into the camp, they would these 3 or 4 families to the left, 3 or 4 to the right, would live in this. So the people that lived, and all that would separate the families, as kids, mum and dad and kids, was a curtain. So family 3, if you like, working from the door in, 1, 2, 3, family 3 would have to go through family 1 and 2 to get to their beds and sleeping space and cooking space, I suppose. I never actually got to see inside one. And that's how they lived. And that was, I thought, God, the poor buggers. And subsistence living. And I suppose they carried on their family things. And if you wanted to procreate, shall we say, you're doing it with everyone else listening. I suppose you had to learn to be quiet. But, that's how they lived. But when the toilet and that went bung, the Americans were straight onto the radio to what they called their CBs. I think they're engineers that fix that sort of stuff, and got them out next morning as a priority to fix this dunny, because they wouldn't go and use the Vietnamese toilet, because what they had was a big setup with a big hole in the ground and a seething mass of gents, what do you call them, maggots. You know, would have been good if you're a fisherman. And they used to squat over that and do their business in full view of everyone, which myself and the other bloke went and did it with them, and they thought, oh, how funny, a white man doing that. But the Yanks wouldn't do it. They had the whole engineers out to fix up their dunny, so they had water to, you know, have a proper sit-down poop. Yeah.
So what, they had a full-on toilet
Well, inside this, yeah, I don't know whether I can't remember, whether it was pull the chain or press the button, but it was still a flush dunny thing, you know.
Well, incredibly sophisticated device out there.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how they. That was them and what they have, as opposed to the living in amongst the poor buggers that didn't have it. They didn't appear to me to try and help them, and they would certainly. The kids would run around the place, and they weren't allowed inside anywhere near this hut that we were in. Which is probably a good thing, I suppose. If, on hindsight, they could have slung a grenade in there or anything, who knows. But that's not something we thought of at the time. But I had a watch that I was given for my 18th birthday, I suppose, and I left it on a counter right near the door. Anyway, it went missing. And I was going to tell I was a bit cranky about it, and I was going to tell the Yanks. And I thought, don't know, if I do that, they'll give these bloody people such a hard time. You know, some poor little kid's probably got it and needs it a bloody sight more than I do. So I never ever said anything, because they would not so much take retribution, but they would, you know, find out, get to the bottom of it. You don't do that from an American, or you don't do that from an Australian. Not stealing's not right, but their circumstances, you couldn't bloody help but think, well, poor little bastard, he needs it more than I do. And if it was a kid, it could have been anyone, I don't know. But their attitude was, they kept themselves insular, really.
Do you think that the reason why you used the local loo and the Americans didn't is because you wanted to get some sort of a hearts and minds thing going on? No,
we weren't there for that. We didn't really mix with them. I think I can remember having one night on the grog with them, and with their beer, which is shocking.
Was it bad?
Oh, it's terrible. There's never no consistency in it because of the different types of water they use. It's not filtered or anything like that. And by the time it gets out to some of these places, it's been a fortnight in the sun, and it's all bottled, and you can see and to keep it cold, or to give you a cold beer, they poured it over ice. Now the ice, you could see the dirt and stuff in it. So not what you'd call hygienic, and it's not a consistent level of alcohol. So you could have one bottle would knock your head off, or you could have, four, pardon me, and nothing would happen. But that's just the way they did things.
Beer making in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, that was just the way it was. They were happy with that, because it always been doing that. No, we had no hearts and minds with them at all. That wasn't our task at all. And it wasn't something we were even asked to do, get to know the locals and be a good bloke to them. We just went and had a poop, because that was where the poop house was.
But you seem to have made an effort.
Oh, I like them now, for the simple reason that coming from a farming background, and the places we visited, they were farmers. And regardless of whether you're farming rice or farming wheat or barley or canola or marijuana, you're a farmer. So you worry about whether it's going to rain, when it's going to rain, is the season late or early, we've got too much rain, we haven't got enough rain, is our seed, are we going to get the harvest off? And that's all so I could identify with that, because you could get talking to them, and a farmer's a farmer's a farmer. You know, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're a farmer, that's how you are. You're a farmer, and you've all got the same basic, apart from, as I said, what you actually farm. It's the same sort of thing. You rely on your earth, your bloody water, and your sun. So you could talk to them, and then you form different attitudes, I suppose, when you're told you're going to Vietnam and they, you know, kill you, which I suppose they do. That's their job. But not the locals. You're not really told much about them, other than how to say "G'day, mum" or whatever, and be polite. So to actually get there, right in amongst them, I consider myself fortunate, because you're right in amongst them, and you talk to them, and you think, they're no bloody different to me. They might look different, but they still think, you transpose them from Zwanmock to Edithburgh, where I grew up, still a farmer. And vice versa, put my old man out there, he's still going to say, he might be planting rice, but he's still going to say, bloody rain hasn't come yet. You know, so, and I thought, well, they're just like us. So it was a real eye-opener. It changed my point of view on the locals.
Well, you said at the time that you really didn't have any fear from them. You know, like one of these kids could have lobbed a grenade into your hut, but you never thought about it at the time.
No.
Did you have any sort of guard duty on the...
No, we didn't. And neither did the Americans. That was all provided by the ARVN. I'm not sure whether they were real ARVN people, or because they had all sorts of groups. They had the regional force, popular force, ARVN, and probably a heap of others. And I think we were amongst the regional force. So they're soldier farmers. They probably really didn't want to be doing what they were doing, but they probably got a few extra bob paid to them to wear a uniform, and they had a big wooden tower with an M60 on it, so I used to climb up and talk to the bloke in there. But that was wide open, and I'm sure he wouldn't have bloody known what he was doing.
What was he doing, sorry, up in the tower?
Well, he was part of the security, as you say, who looked after the place. Well, that was him, up at this bloody wooden tower that that it wouldn't have been very hard at all to knock him out of. But it never happened. Well, not while we were there. It may have happened, but certainly not while we were there. So I'm sure that there was some sort of collaboration or collusion or whatever amongst the locals and the VC. They didn't want to make waves for this particular place, I suppose. They thought if they blow it up, well, that's going to affect the locals. If they affect the locals, I'm not going to get my taxes. You know, because the Yanks was out there, blow it all apart and poison it and burn it down and all this sort of stuff, or the ARVN would, because they didn't care about the people outside the towns. They didn't care, hamlets, nothing. So I suppose there was a lot more going on in the background that we'll probably never understand, unless, and I, looking back on it, I think that's what it was. If we upset the apple cart was going on inside this hamlet plus the little village outside, well, we're not going to get any taxes. We need the taxes to carry on our fight, plus they were probably living in amongst us as well without us knowing. And that's the way they conducted things, because they've been doing that for, you know, Japanese and all
Generations.
that. Generations, yeah, that was part of their way of handling things. And whilst we thought they were, you know, sly buggers, I think they were survivors.
That's an interesting point that you've got there. How would you have to interact with the Americans on a daily basis within that situation?
We would supply our own rations, I think, and they had fridges and generator, and to a certain degree it was good. We'd take grog out there, although I don't really remember getting on the grog with them, but I suppose we did. We would taking turns at cooking. They would go out on patrols. We just pitch into the way they ran their. I suppose that's another thing. I suppose domestic side of it. I don't really remember doing the cooking, but we must have, and we would have had to pitch in and help. But just another thing that I thought of, and that, in as much, I think the VC would tolerate the locals, the popular force, which I'm pretty sure they must have been, because at one stage they had a Daiwi Duck. I remember his name. Daiwi was captain. Duck was his surname, or whatever they have is there. And he was a bit of a go-getter. And they used to go out on these patrols and they'd say, well, yes, we've had a contact. You know, they'd fire off the guns and they'd come back. Did you shoot any? No. Did they shoot any? Yeah, no. And that was the way it was. But anyway, Daiwi Duck got a bit fair income about it. And
is he some sort of a...
He was just one of the blokes, and he thought, well, he might have hated the communists and wanted to get rid of them. So what he did was have a few fair income contacts and stirred up the VC, and they didn't like it. So to this day, I reckon they set him up, went out, his own blokes dobbed him in, they shot him, castrated him, slit open his stomach, put his genitals, if you like, in that, as a warning to, well, we don't mind having a few contacts where you fire a few rounds at the place, but don't overstep your mark. And, you know, I'm sure that's another thing in hindsight, of course. You look back years later and you think, well, maybe this is the way it worked. But as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, your horizons are fairly blinkered, but having read things later on,
How far away
shit,
from...
I was right amongst that. I could have been in strife.
in retrospect. How far away from you did that happen?
Only about a click down the road. They never move far. They don't believe in, you know, going too far away from home. So...
Why was this guy sort of so happy, Daiwi Duck, why was he so happy to stir things up?
Well, I don't really know. In actual fact, I knew him, met him, and had a beer with him. I suppose he's just one of the... Whether he was posted out there to get something happening or not, or whether he's posted out there to get him away from stirring some other place up, I don't know. But that was his idea. He'll go and take the fight to the baddies out there, and they didn't like it, and neither did the local PF type farmers. They think, shit, that's not what we're here for. We're here to bloody coexist and farm our land. So they got rid of him.
So how long would you set up in little hamlets like this for?
Fortnight at a time, depending on the situation with the patrols, whether they were going to be around that area for that time. I think sometimes we would man Swan Lock for 6 weeks at a time. And there was another one north of Nui Dat, and then another one at Fung Tau itself, up on what was known as VC Hill, where the Americans had all their antennas they talked back to America.
Oh, I didn't know they had a big communication here in Vung Tau.
Monstrous, yeah.
Is that in your second tour, or is that
first tour?
in your
That's all first tour.
That's all first tour.
I have mixed a bit of second.
Yeah, I was.
We only did the relays in the first tour. The second time, halfway through, we had an officer posted to us, and his job was to better the communications, and which he certainly did. Managed to get different types, a big antenna that we had 3 of in the world. I think ours was supposedly came from the United States Air Force, but I think there was CIA involved. We had one of them. There was one in Antarctica, and there was one which I never really ever remember what the third one was, but it solved this skip distance problem. Therefore, it also solved our manning problem to a great degree, that we didn't need relays then. The patrols could work back straight into Nui Dat with fairly, with certainty. Well, as certain as you ever get with HF communications. So that was a good thing, and well, that pretty much solved the last 4 months of our tour, first tour of our communications.
So you ended up literally on the cutting edge of technology.
In as much as antennas went, yes. Yeah, the rest of it, she was fairly blunt.
You mentioned the signal operations at headquarters as well as the relay stations. Can you describe what they were, Craig?
Yep. Did I finish the antenna? Did we finish that?
Do you want to, just complete that?
Yes, we were there for it to come down, and it was supposed to go back to the Americans, so we boxed it up as best we could with what timber we could find, and it got sent off to the wharves at Vung Tau to come back. And anyway, when as we find out later on, when they were trying to load it on the boat, the boxes broke. So the engineers that were present at the time reboxed it, put it on the boat, and we finished up with it here at Swanbourne, where it spent about 10 or 15 years service here to the regiment, and that there was a follow-up from the Americans for quite a while. They said, well, we want it back, but the replies I don't think ever got sent from here saying that we had it at all, and then it just died a natural death. But yes, it was, at the time it was state of the art and quite an expensive bit of kit. But in the end we finished up, we fixed it one too many times, and each time you had to fix it you had to drop it down. Well, our expertise wasn't all that successful at that, and that's what we did. We dropped it down instead of lowering it. But anyway, it served us well, and that was a big reminder to the blokes that used it in Vietnam that of the generosity of the Americans.
I might just pause you there for a minute, Craig.
I saw it too.
You mentioned another incident regarding the Yanks when we were changing the tapes before.
Yes, I'm not sure really what the one was, but another, yes, an instance with them. We had the relay at Duk Tan, which I think I remembered. I mentioned that was one of our relays, and anyway, to get out there one time, they decided. I can see that too. They decided that I would go out with the Americans by road. So the Americans were coming from Vung Tau through Nui Dat, so they came up to the sergeant's mess on the hill and got themselves blithered, the two Americans, and come about 5:30 at night, just before dark, they decided that they would drive home, and so they came and got me and shoved me in the back of their Jeep, and away they went with me in the back. And it was after dark. Roads were classified as a green road or a orange road or a red road. Well, a red road you didn't drive on, but these Yanks had enough bravado in them to not worry about that, but I hadn't. So off we go, boring up the road in this bloody Jeep, and I was dead set scared sitting in the back of this thing. So all I could do was, and they were arguing amongst each other, which Yanks seem to do. They get a few beers in them and they can't help but argue with each other. And I thought, oh, hell, we're setting ducks to all and sundry, there's no doubt about it if anything happens. So I just cocked my weapon and set it on automatic and sat in the back and hoped like hell nothing happened. And it didn't, luckily, because they would have been useless. But how we didn't run off the road, I don't know, because the roads are nothing flash, and they're pissed and driving like like sterling moss or whatever the Yank equivalent of sterling moss is. And poor old me in the back there going grey. But
You mentioned another incident before where you set off some flares, I think.
oh yes, sorry, yes, my mistake. Yes, we were at doing a relay on VC Hill, where all the American civilian operators were manning their communications, I guess, back to America, and which included TV and all sorts of stuff. And VC Hill being such a high feature, well, that's what they used. Plus, it was quite easy to keep secure as well, because there was only one little old goat track up to it. Really, even in a Land Rover, you had to drive up and back and drive back up again. You couldn't just go straight up. The road was that windy, and all their stuff they used to bring in by Chinook. If they were, all their equipment came in by Chinook, and the only other way to attack this hill would be almost up straight cliffs. And anyway, I'm sure it was New Year's Eve, we went over to partake of the Americans' hospitality, and having seen all the stuff that they had that we didn't, we grabbed a cart, and after we'd had a few and went back to where we were staying, which is an old stone half fallen down French bunker. And after getting through another half of this carton, we thought, oh, it's getting close to New Year's, the midnight. So we had a box of flares in this. Well, it wasn't ours. We purloined them, in actual fact, from our hosts, and set off a few in the vicinity of the Americans and their picture theatre. Well, that stirred up a hornet's nest, as the Yanks like to say. And they came racing over, and we said, well, I don't know where this would have come from, because it was easy enough to hide the evidence. We just threw it down the cliffs. Well, you never find it in a pink fit. We didn't have to bury anything, just throw it off, and it went 100 metres down. And the Americans, I don't think, were all that keen, because most of them were civvies anyway, civilians anyway, so we got away with that one. But it was one of those instances that was funny at the time.
Nearly got unfunny, did it?
Nearly got unfunny, yes. Yeah, but their heart wasn't in it, really. And we probably looked innocent.
How much leave did you get while you were up there?
Leave was you would get 2 days at a time. I'm not sure if it was a weekend or a couple of days during the week at the Rest and Convalescence Centre, which was a building in Vung Tau itself. It was a 2-storey building from memory, and you would just go down there. It had a bar, and you were allowed to go into town up to curfew time, I think, and drink at the local places, which I think serve local beer. So if you were down there for a drink, it wasn't really worth going to these places. So I just remember going down there once, really. The other leave you got was 5 days to Bangkok, Hong Kong, Taipei, and somewhere else. At that stage there was no leave back to Australia, although I think married blokes could. I'm not totally sure on that, but single blokes couldn't, I know that. So 5 days in Bangkok I had. That was a matter of getting an aircraft to Ton Sanut, where you were put up with what seemed like 40,000 Americans in the same place, and then they would process you, give you your tickets, and put you on an aircraft to Bangkok or wherever. You'd go over there, get picked up by a taxi, or you'd have to hire a taxi, I think. Just go in and do what you did in Bangkok, visit Thailand in miniature as one of the places, buy a 3-piece suit which you took back to Nui Dat, which fell to pieces.
What were the bars like in Bangkok?
They had decent beer and were air conditioned, and it was much better than what we had. Yeah.
Were they a bit of an eye opener?
Yes, yeah. So some of the things you see about, I don't know if it's exclusively Bangkok, but I seem to associate it with it. You went into the bars and there would just be a big glass partition thing that we would look through. On the other side of it, there was tiered seating with girls on it with numbers, and they would, everywhere you went, they would give you a beer. You would go and have a look at a tailor's, and the first thing they do is give you a beer. Well, I reckon their beer was about 10%, quite a strong brew. I'd say, of course, after you'd been in about half a dozen shops, you were feeling in the mood to buy anything, so you'd buy all the garbage under the sun. But in this bar, that was an eye-opener with the tiered seating like a movie theatre, except you had girls in there with numbers. And if it took your fancy, you'd say number 16 or whatever. And I guess if it didn't take your fancy, you didn't do it. But that really was an eye-opener. I mean, it's something that I'd probably got in Australia now. I don't know, but certainly to a young 21-year-old, if I was that at the time, it was.
What was the army's
smile to your face.
What was the army's attitude towards prostitution?
I think it was tolerated. Well, some of the blokes, especially if you were stationed at Vung Tau, I'm pretty sure they would get, if they weren't working, they would have leave and be able to go to the bars and stuff in town at any time they liked. And there was blokes that came back with Vietnamese brides. So, I'm not saying they were prostitutes, but they were accessible if that's where you lived. We at Nui Dat, I mean, there was nothing. There was no women. There's nothing on the base of blokes. Well, we didn't have any like cleaners or cooks or anything like that. Well, no one on our base other than Australians and the few and Kiwis and the few Americans we had as advisors and the artillery. So, but really wasn't a something we really ever had to worry about. I suppose when you shot down to Vung Tau, if you felt the need, you bore off and find someone somewhere. But no, it was. They didn't mind as long as you didn't get VD. There was a word for it. Anyway, I can't remember that. But the minute you got something like that, and it impeded your ability to do your job, because if you had, say, gonorrhea, well then you couldn't go to the field, you couldn't operate, so then you would be in strife because you'd let the team down, basically. So from that point of view, it wasn't tolerated at all. And
so what precautions were taken?
Well, probably none if they got it. There was availability of French letters, as they were called in those days, or frangers, and that was it, I suppose.
So contraception was available as opposed to abstinence?
Yes, yeah, and it was available from the RAP, the Regimental Aid Post, the medic. I mean, it was better to give you that than say, well, don't do it, because you go down and get a belly full of grog and what is it? A standing penis has got no conscience, something like that.
Yeah, I'll buy that for $1.
Mm. Well, it was. They used to have one particular place, 100 100 piali, well 100 piastres that was, but it was called 100 piali, and I think that was about $1 if it was $1, so she was fairly cheap. But I guess I never did go down there, but from all accounts, yeah, the money you paid is what you got. So if you paid $1 for it, that's all you were going to get, so $1 worth.
What about drugs?
I never really saw it, but it did go on. At the second tour, there was people I know up from us right on the top of SAS Hill. They had a contingent of mixed cores really, and I know they were caught with marijuana. I think that was it. My first tour, it was available when you went on R&C, this rest and convalescence, because a mate of mine that I went down with, he got hold of some, so we thought, well, we were smokers at the time, we thought, oh, we'll give this a try, which we did, and all I can remember was this funny, you giggled for the first 5 minutes, and then I've never had such a bloody hangover in my whole life. Your bloody head ached, and because we'd had a few beers before, and thought, oh, this is a good idea, and I've just bloody terrible. So that memory stuck in my life. I thought of this in my mind. I thought, if that's what it's going to be like, you can shove it. But that's the only time that we ever had drugs, and that was from this particular place, and where he got them he never told me. I think he was just giving them. And, but in as much as our blokes taking it, no. I mean, such a small unit that you would know there's not much that went on that sooner or later you didn't get to find out about. But I'm sure it went on in other parts of the army, and probably especially the people at Vung Tau who had, or Saigon, who were permanently there. I guess if they wanted it, was certainly available on the street.
What about chemical drugs, stimulants?
As in, like LSD and stuff like that. That was LSD in our day. Oh, I don't know I didn't know what amphetamines was. I know LSD because he used to sing about it, but what the hell it was, I didn't know, and didn't need to know. Well, never had the inclination to know, I suppose. You just found out things about it. It was a little tablet, and you took it, and it could stay in your system for who knows how long and recur. That's all we ever knew. And I really don't know of anyone who took it.
I don't suppose a war zone's really a place to experiment with LSD. Although
no, there were heaps and heaps of reports of the Americans doing it, but the ones I came across never did. Well, if they did, I didn't know. And I mean, unless you know what drugs do to people, who knows what they've taken, I suppose. We were quite bloody innocent when it's all said and done.
Do you think the Aussies were more innocent than the Yanks when it comes to vices?
Oh, yes, I suppose they were, yeah. Well, speaking from my perspective and the blokes I knew and blokes I lived with, the only way we found out about a lot of this stuff was bloody Playboys. There was an ample supply of Playboys through the American system, so you'd read the Playboy and you'd say, oh, they were LSD, and I think when we were there it was the old Woodstock, and they were all taking this drugs, and we had the movie and all that sort of thing. But you read about it, but even if you wanted it, it wasn't there, especially to us, because we were in isolation. And then when you got down to where it probably was available, the first thing you did went and got a belly full of grog, and who needs drugs? I mean, one drug for another, I know, but you weren't chasing LSD just to find out what it was, because you couldn't care less.
You mentioned Christmas earlier. How did you celebrate Christmas?
Well, the tradition in the army is that you have rum and coffee gets brought around, and they pick out a sergeant or one of the blokes out of the squadron or whatever it is to do that sort of thing. And our particular bloke was a bloke by the name of Jock Butchart. He was our armourer, and a hell of a good armourer. But he liked his grog and he had a bit of a belly on him but he was as I say, hell of a good armour and a hell of a nice bloke. Well, he turned up just after daybreak up where we were, and he dished out the rum and coffee, but you still had to shave if you're in camp, so you had a rum and coffee and a shave and a wash and that, and between our troop up on this part of the hill and down below to the other troop, H troop, there was steps hewn into the side of the hill, and they consisted of they would cut them out roughly first, put in 2 star pickets, star pickets, 2 short ones, and put planks on them and backfill with gravel. Well, old Jock had a fair bit of this rum and coffee on the way up the hill, I think, and he was standing on the hill. Everyone had enough? Yes, thanks, Jock. Ho, ho, ho! Turned around and just went straight down the hill. Never touched a step. So, poor old Jock, wasn't the best for the rest of the day after that.
Might as well have been a chimney, huh?
Yes, yeah, because he had he had the Father Christmas stuff on and the white beard and all the hat and that sort of thing in his bucket. But the bucket went into the bamboo and Jock went down the hill. So I never knew whether H Troop actually got the rum and coffee, but we did. But then after that you would go down and have a normal breakfast. Then they would have a lunch, which was served by the officers and the sergeants to us, and you would be allowed to have beer and stuff at the actual dining table, which was a good thing, a good feed, and you carried on from there into the afternoon.
So you'd call it a good Christmas piss-up?
That's what it was, yeah. Yep. But I think someone brought the point up the other day, we talking religion, I said I was a altar boy, well so was this Curly, and we never ever saw a padre that I can remember in 2 tours we ever see a padre. There was no such thing as counselling and all this sort of stuff that's available now. But they put a truck on for Christmas Eve for church service. At midnight was the normal. Well, in the Church of England, I suppose most of them they have your Christmas service then, and we all lined up, all those that were inclined, and off we went to church. But Curly and I got about halfway down and sort of looked at each other and said, I don't know if I really want to be here, so we got out the back of the truck and walked back home, and I don't know that I've been all that religious ever since. Maybe it's unfortunate or not, but some things you carry with you and some things you don't carry on with, and some things you don't. But that was sort of the start of Christmas, that church service, then the breakfast, the lunch, and finished up halfway through the afternoon, I suppose. And the unfortunate ones had to carry on the radio shifts and guard the camp, while the more fortunate ones carried on merrily. But it was, I suppose, considering it was a Christmas piss-up. And that's all we can really say about it, I suppose. I don't remember anyone singing any carols or anything like that. No.
Between your two tours, how long did you spend at home in Australia?
We got back in February '69 and went back in February '71, so 2 years. Yep.
So that's quite a long time in between tours.
Yes, yeah, because some blokes spent 6 months, other blokes 12, some 18. I got married, so I stayed as long as I could.
Did you have any expectations of going back to Vietnam?
That's not something I really gave a great deal of consideration to at that particular time, because most people in SAS went back twice. It was part and parcel of the territory. And I know, listening to myself now, I think, well, you were pretty bloody thick. You never asked many questions. But you didn't, and I wasn't the only one. I mean, it was just the nature of the beast. This is what you were going to do. And so we went back training, did advanced courses, medical, med-aid course, different other things, exercises. The new blokes that came into the troop, we became the old blokes. We became the corporals as opposed to being the down the bottom of the food chain. We had other young blokes down the bottom of the food chain. And we just lined up and trained them, and away we went again.
How did they stack up?
They were good, yeah.
I think when I asked you where you both met and when, you were going to mention something about your marriage and your thoughts of going back to Vietnam.
Yes, yeah, well, we got married in 70, and then Jane came along in October 70. Then, well, I knew I was going back to Vietnam, and Lois never questioned it either. It was just, that's the way it was going to be. And I went off to Vietnam, and she went back to the farm with my parents, her and Jane, my eldest, went back to South Australia for the time I was going to be away. And the night we headed for Vietnam, where our married quarter, Army married quarter, was just across the road from here. And so we leap in the car and off to the airport. Married blokes were considered that they were more sensible than the single blokes, so we were allowed to make our own way out to the airport. We got to Garrett Road, and the fan belt went on the car. So I thought, I know how to fix this. Take off your pantyhose, you know, those pantyhose things. Tied it on the fan belt in your drive, because that would work. Doesn't work at all. It's a fallacy. Just went as soon as you took. So, of course, it was February and bloody hot. We did manage to get out to the airport without blowing the car up. And, of course, I couldn't fix the car. There she is with a brand new kid. And but as luck would have it, her sister had got married in New Zealand, and they turned up at the airport that night. So I met them for the first time and said to the husband, you'll have to get the fan belt fixed before you're about to get home. And hopped on the plane and left. And when I got back to Vietnam, it was a sort of a the same scenario as when we got there in the first place. We landed at Ton Sanut on the aircraft, got to Nui Dat, got picked up by the truck, went up to the hill, and nothing's changed. And you look at it, and you see the sign, you know, SAS, 2 SAS Squadron. They'd say, no, it's still 1 SAS Squadron. And the same buildings and same gravel and the same thing. And your heart just goes, oh, what am I doing here? And your whole, that was one of the biggest challenges I think you faced, was you think, shit, I've left a wife and brand new kid at home. I'm bloody back here, and for why?
You were just saying that it was this strange sense of deja vu.
Yes, it was. I can't have been the only one, because speaking to different blokes over the years, pretty much the same stories come out. I think, oh, what are we doing here? And I guess in a way that that strengthened ties amongst us old fellas that's carried on too. That we fronted up for another go, and as you started to think, later on as the tour progressed, so I've had a guts full of this. There'd always be someone else to say, "Oh, but we're here and we've done it once. We'll do it again. We've got the young fellas to consider." And so you do it, and well, the letters home, I suppose. Lois used to write every day from the farm, so you could always, unless there was a postie strike, which really didn't affect us all that much, I don't suppose. You would get that letter a day, even though it just said, well, Jane's broken her arm, which she did at one stage, and but different things like that. But there's nothing much happens really on a day-to-day basis, even up there, unless you just got up in the morning, had your shave, went to breakfast, did your communications or whatever. Even though different things happen in that day, shift-wise, I suppose, might have different contracts and contacts, I should say, or different things happen or nothing happens. It's still pretty much the same sort of day. You still go to tea at 6 o'clock, and if there happened to be beer at the boozer, you'd go up and drink as much as you could. Or if there was a good movie on, you'd go to the movies, because we had movies every night. That's something us as SIGs used to run.
Oh, really?
Yeah, used to show the movies.
Was this set up on SAS Hill?
Yeah, but most units had their own movies, pictures, and they would come through the American system. We got lots and lots of up-to-date movies. Like I'm trying to think now, and I can't. Woodstock and all the things that were showing back in Australia. Well, the Americans got all that stuff, so we just tagged on to their system somehow, and you would bid for the movies you wanted and go and see them. And quite often the projectors would play up and strip the bloody movies and strip the sprockets, on the side of the old movies that were cog-fed. Or the whoever was showing the movie had his 2 cans that we were supposed to allow, and he had another 20 on top of that. Then he came down to show the movie. Well, the reels would get put on wrong, or we had a tiered movie theatre that one of the blokes had built beforehand, because we had some pretty diverse sort of people amongst this, carpenters and what have you, but the bloke would be showing the movie and click the reel onto the projector and miscalculate, and it'd down on the ground and just roll straight down through the middle of the movie theatre, across the muddy road and down under the screen, which is a drop of about 12 feet. So of course there'd be bloody people would be getting up the projectionist for doing the wrong thing, and the movie'd be ruined. But that didn't happen all that often, but it did happen. Or they'd showed movies out of sequence, or they hadn't been rewound, but that added to it too. It all took up half an hour while they fixed that, so that was another half an hour you weren't sitting in your tent.
You were mentioning mail before. How often did you write to your wife?
Every day, or most days. I know what you're getting at, I think. To keep the peace at home, where if we were going out on patrol or something, you would write 7 letters, say, to cover that period of time, and then this mate that was my best man and vice versa, he would post them each day. He would post one of the letters. I'd just leave them marked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because you could, as I said, nothing really changed. It was just you were saying, "How's Jane? How are you?" love to mum and dad and love you and all the rest of it. So you just reword that a bit and it's hot up here or it's raining or something. That's all you had to say. So it was quite easy to do that. Then she didn't have to worry whether you were out in the bush and would never ever know and didn't know until some year. I never told her till some years ago. That's what not just me, you know, that was quite a common occurrence because it just saved them worrying about what was going on. They didn't need that hassle, you know, of worrying too much about you without, on top of, you know, living with my mum and dad can't have been easy. Not that the mum and dad were difficult, but she's not home, you're not there, she's got first baby that she's, you know, got to learn all about and it's basically the sole, well, she is the sole parent looking after the kids. So she didn't need any me up there bleating and saying how hard it was and all that sort of stuff, crap.
So what changed with this second tour? Were you made more senior?
Yes, yeah, I was corporal at that stage and we were responsible for the communications, making sure the communications...
Oh, that'll be the door.
It will be too. Yeah.
So you're in a more senior position. So how does your daily life change?
Well, it means that there was no shift work anymore, but it meant a longer day, week type day if you're doing that job. But our day would generally start at 7, or 6:30 at work. Prior to that, we got up, had a shave, had a whatever, and got to work at 6:30. Made sure everything was right for that day. 7:30, I would go to breakfast, or the crypto clerk, cipher bloke we'd just alternate. And if things weren't, you know, if we'd had a patrol that's in strife, or we'd just stay there and until things were cleared, and then go to breakfast, lunch, or whatever. But it was a 6:30 day to 5:30 at night, and you just went and had your lunch as you could. Some days were diamonds, some days were stones, as they say.
Would you prefer... Sorry, you go.
Busy?
Yeah, busy.
Yeah. Yes. That made the day go quicker for us. But I had a backup for my position, but the cipher bloke didn't for his. So he was really there 7 days a week. If we weren't in the communication centre doing the patrols, the communications, we would be out doing work tasks around the area beautification, as they called it, you know, cutting down grass or poisoning things or burning them off or this sort of stuff, just to keep the growth around the area down, especially coming up to a wet season, because when everything dries out, fire would go through the place in no time.
Was it just you signals folk that were in charge of that?
No, there'd be headquarter people would do it all day. We were the ones with the most amount of manpower in that regard, so we would do that in conjunction with the patrols that were in camp. After they'd come back from patrol, they would go down to Vung Tau, have a day off or a couple of days off. Then they would come back and do routine tasks like helping the mess and that sort of thing, you know, peeling spuds and, well, no, that's wrong. We didn't have spuds to peel. They're all Second World War plastic, bloody add water type stuff. But they would help in the mess, cleaning. Part of their stuff was cleaning the dixies and, that, you know, pots and pans and what have you. So we'd share those sort of duties around the place. Our job was to do the Garbo run. We'd, as I said, we were self-contained, so that means you did your own mess, pick up the 44-gallon drums of slop from the mess, and each troop had their own area where they threw their cardboard and stuff off the rations and anything, the old greens and bits. And then we would do a run round in the old Mark III International truck and put the 44s on the truck, and then take them down to the tip, empty them out, and have a scavenge while you're down there. Good, lots of stuff in those tips.
Like what?
Well, greens that people throw out but they're torn. So what you do is bring them back, give them a wash, take them down the Q store and change them for a new one. So you come home with about 30 pairs of bloody greens, which you finish up at the end of 20 years in the army chucking out, because it was a good idea at the time. All these boots and stuff, they'll come in handy. They never ever do. Well, they never did for me. But it was a good idea. It was passed a bit of time and yeah, so that was one of our SIG's specific tasks, if you like. We were the Garbos. And that became a bit of a tradition and is still going on nowadays. Well, not nowadays, they've got civilians to do it. But it continued right on till, well, when I got out in 85 or something. That was part of the SIGs. When you went and exercise, the SIGs did the Garbo run.
Seems like you got the short straw with that.
No, it was good. You'd be surprised what was in the tip. Get to meet a lot of interesting people.
Where are the people that are interesting?
Down the tip, you know, when their particular people are doing their tip runs, you could swap stuff that they were throwing out that you could take and use, and all past time.
It's all recycling before its time, really.
Yes, we're forerunners in that.
Sound like a pile of wombles, really.
Yeah.
So, apart from those sorts of duties, I mean, was the camp running more effectively than it was the first time you were there?
It was much more organised, much cleaner. The tents were better sited. The first time we were sort of stuck into the side of the hill, a side of a part of the hill. The next time, in between our trips, they'd moved, levelled out an area further up, cleared all the bamboo and undergrowth and stuff, and put 4 or 5 tents up there, which was wide open and much easier to access and keep clean. We were basically living right in amongst the bamboo, and which I suppose, given hindsight, was not a smart thing to do if we had a fire or anything like that, but we didn't. I mean, you don't think about it till it happens. I mean, we had all the fire buckets and all that sort of thing, but we used to cover them with kero to keep the mozzies out. So I suppose if you ever had to use them, you'd throw them on the fire and probably fuel it rather than kill it.
What would you do with the kero to keep the mozzies out?
Well, the mozzies would breed in any little bit of water that was around, so you had your fire buckets filled with water. But to keep the mozzies out, you put a kerosene across the top of the, kerosene into the bucket. It would sit on the top and act as a, well, the mozzies wouldn't go near the kerosene. So that would stop them breeding in the fire bucket, which is good, I suppose, until you actually had to use it.
Have a fire.
They were a pest, there's no doubt about that, the mozzies. Different seasons, snakes were a pest. We had one under the main, when we were first there, we had 3 of these 14 or 16 by 16 American tents all joined together to form what we called a marquee, and there was about 10 of us lived in that, I suppose. And we had people swear was a cobra living under the tent. And we also had mongoose, and they would fight. You could hear it fighting with someone of a night. This bloody thing. I never saw the snake, and I didn't ever want to. But the mongoose would very cunning. We would put our rations in a tin, well, just lying around in the first instance, and you'd hear something at them, so get the torch and there'd be a mongoose, and off it'd go. And so we thought, we'll put the rations in the ration tin where they should be. So we did that, and the mongoose would knock the ration tin over, and that would knock the lid off. Then they would get into the thing, so you'd put the torch on, away they'd go. And after a while they realised that all that was happening was the torch. Nothing else happened. So they would stay, and they would continue ratting through the rations. So that would mean you had to get out the boots and actually get out of your mosquito net to get your boot to throw at this bloody mongoose. So after a while, they would work out that you only ever had 2 boots. So if you'd thrown 2 boots, that's all they were going to get, back into the rations. Quite another inane way of passing time, I suppose. They could work that out. But
What do they look like? A ferret?
Bigger than a ferret, I don't know, like a possum, I suppose. But a cranky sort of bloody thing. It's not something you'd pick up and pet. like a ferret, I suppose, because they get cranky, don't they? But yeah, you quite often see them. They must have a thing against snakes, I don't know. But I always used to make a hell of a racket. As I said, I never ever saw this supposed cobra and really didn't want to.
Did you have floorboards on your tent?
Yes, yeah. Well, they were just floorboards suspended so you didn't drown the rain or get washed out. And around the tent you had PSP, which is metal with holes in it that the Americans use to put down, it links together to form, can put it down the desert and it will, or anywhere for that matter, that's soft ground and you can land aircraft on it. It all links together and used for heaps and heaps of things, but we had that to as pathways going up the hill, and duck boards as we called them, but pallets, to once again raise you above the water level. And
well, if you're on a hill, the sort of water's running down, so would that cause trouble?
It did, because when it rains, and it would wash parts of the hill away, but not to the extent where we were to create any, mudslides or rock slides or anything like that. No, the hill wasn't big enough for that. It's a hill, just a good old Western Australian type hill, really, not a Fairdingham Kiwi hill. And
were you still doing these sorts of lost the word, patrols with APCs and?
Yes, that continued on right through from all the involvement. In actual fact, the second tour where I think I mentioned before, did that nighttime communications, we were made to stay out there for the 7 days, even though we sent in, look, there's nothing going on. The patrol commander, we had two patrols together, so we had 2 patrol commanders. And anyway, the OC at the time said, no, you're not coming back in. And we were to be exfiltrated by APC. So anyway, we packed up the ambush site and went and married up with the APCs, and after 7 days out there, you're dirty and smelly, and all you want to do is get back and hopefully, well, in this case, there was nothing to debrief us about, but go and have a shower, then have your debrief. You still had to have a debrief and say what happened, but they were quick because nothing happened. And coming back in, we were going slow, you know, and what's going on? You'd say to the track commander, the APC commander, I don't know, we've just been told to go slow. We're not allowed to be back in, because we were pulled out fairly early in the morning, and we're not allowed to be back before 10 o'clock. And what the bloody hell's going on? Of course, you don't know anything. You're stuck in the back of this bloody thing with another 4 or 5 smelly buggers. Not that you smell each other, that because you all smell the same. Anyway, when we did get back, what we had to do was slowly through task force, and then they roared up SAS Hill and came to a screeching halt outside the mess. And of course, we get out the back of these bloody things, not all that happy with the treatment of coming slow and then all of a sudden roaring to a halt, pulling up and all squashing to the front of this bloody thing, and get out the back. And what it was to put on a show for Malcolm Fraser, who was the Minister for Defence at the time. He wanted to see some fair dinkum SAS blokes coming back from the bush. So we met Malcolm Fraser, and they put on morning tea for us, and somewhere they'd got scones and cream and a jam, and there we are, having to stay with Malcolm Fraser and have these scones and bloody jam and cream and a cup of tea. Well, one of the blokes was a national serviceman, so he didn't give a rat's bum what he did. And actually owns a brothel in Victoria at the moment. Well, he did some time ago when I last spoke to him. And well, I'm buggered if I'm standing around here doing this shit. And he just walked off. And come back here. What's his bloody name? God, I nearly had. Anyway, he said, no, you can stick it up your arse. And off he went, because he didn't care what happened to him.
You just wanted a shower.
Yeah, bloody stand round after being in the bush with this prick. You know. So that's what. Our second tour, I think I mentioned national service people before. We never had national service with us. Up until that time, we started to run out of people. So what they did, rather than we asked for national service volunteers, or excuse me, the system did.
How did you run out of people, considering your...
Well, the attrition rate was very high. Some blokes didn't want to go and do 2 tours. Blokes' wives said, well,
no,
you go back, or you go back and I won't be here two minutes after you leave. So, you know, you lose people, and other people do their 3 years with 1 tour in it, because they could do 3 or 6 years in those days, and they don't want to go back again. So we ran short of people, and so someone came up with the idea of putting national service through recruit training, and then not corps training. They would come over here and get taught SAS skills as opposed to infantry skills. They're one and the same, but they're different. And so we got, I suppose, 15, maybe more, that came away with us on our second tour. And they were a breath of fresh air, because I was never a military bloody moron. I hated this, you know, marching and yes sir, no sir. That's you did your job, and once you'd done that, as far as I was concerned, you got nothing more to do, and which wasn't the norm at the time. So watching these national servicemen operate was good, because they operated the same way. We've done our job, we've done it well. Get off our backs, and they weren't afraid to say it, because it wasn't their bloody career. So that was good. You could have a good old laugh out of a lot of the things that they did, flouting the system, but were every bit as good as the regular SAS soldier. Just no constraints, and in regard to career type thing and having to look good, because as I say, they were every bit as good as our blokes. Well, they were our blokes, every bit as good as a regular soldier. So I quite enjoyed that, a lot like MASH. When MASH came along later, I'm not sure when MASH started, but you could look at that and you could see these blokes, and just their attitude.
You conscripted, you don't want to be there, but you're trying to make the best of it.
No, they didn't mind being there. They just couldn't see the sense in the how the army operated. But as far as they were concerned, it didn't need to have all the trappings and the bullshit, as they called it. You didn't really need that. And as far as I was concerned, you didn't either. You did your job and you didn't need all that other superfluous crap put on you, like painting rocks white. What do you want to paint a bloody rock white for? But that's what you did. But they wouldn't. Or they'd, tip the paint over and say, oh, we'll run out of paint, or throw it in the bush, and, this sort of stuff, which I don't suppose, as a corporal, I was supposed to find that amusing, but I did.
So in a social sense, did you actually have a better time the second time round?
No, I don't suppose. I had more freedom because it wasn't working shift work. We weren't going out on... we weren't leaving the base, I suppose, from that point of view. I likened it in a way to being at Nui Dat was basically like being in Casuarina or somewhere, which is the minimum security prison here, whatever it is. You were there, but you were in prison because you couldn't go anywhere. So you made do with what you had. I haven't explained that quite like I wanted to, but basically you're in prison because you can't go anywhere. You're tied to this place, and the only time you got out was if you're lucky enough to go down to Vung Tau on an R&C or off on an R&R, which I was due to come back to Australia, but never ever did get back here. We pulled out, luckily, which I wasn't sorry about.
Was the war really winding down during that time that you were there?
Yes. The difference between our first tour and our second tour was quite marked. We were flat out the first time. And the second time our communications setup was a lot better, and we probably could have handled the number of contacts and stuff we had the first time without all the dramas, but they didn't occur in anywhere near the number. Just they just never happened. Never really knew why. We just presumed that we were on top of things, and that the VC or NVA would skirt the place rather than have a confrontation, because I suppose sooner or later, without blowing the Australians' bags, no one ever ran. So if they ran into you, they knew you were going to probably stand and fight. So do they need that bloody hassle? And if you're standing and fighting, you can, you've got a better backup of artillery and gunship support and this sort of thing. So maybe they were still obviously active in the area, but I doubt. I just think that they didn't. They avoided the confrontation unless they had to, unless you actually found a bunker system or something that they wanted to defend because they had to. They had a lot of stuff tied up in it that they didn't want you to get to. Well, then they would fight, but otherwise, I think that they just happy to let things roll along.
Did that happen in that area, defending bunker systems?
Yes. Oh, yes, yeah. There was lots and lots of bunker systems found. Well, quite a few. It's, different books that people have written. Yeah, our blokes found heaps and heaps of bunker systems, and oh yeah, very active, really, especially that Swan Mock Long Green area, because they owned it and they'd lived there all. I suppose most of them are locals to some sort of degree.
Had the communication system changed at all?
Um,
Shortcuts, for instance?
no, not really. No, the whole thing went along with the basics being exactly the same from 1967 through to 71. They became quicker, and our squadron the second time achieved the highest success rate in the amount of successful communications, that is, achieved a result. They sent a message or we sent them one, and it actually finished, if you like, rather than finished halfway through or whatever. But having said that, the 5 squadrons that had been there before us all contributed to that end. We just bore the fruit of 6 years' labour, if you like. So it was pretty much organised for our second tour. We really didn't have to change antennas, change any of the setup. It was all hardwired in. You basically just sat there and checked things to make sure they were actually still plugged in, or you hadn't had a lightning strike, like we said before, that blew all the wires out. But if you did, you would just replace them in the same positions that they were before. We didn't have to change anything. It was all where we were at that stage. You probably could have gone for 10 years without changing a thing. Just make sure your maintenance was done. I mean, obviously technology would have changed your radios and that sort of thing, but you wouldn't have needed to do anything other than that. As far as what we could provide, it was as good as you were going to get.
Were you still using Morse code?
Yes, yeah, we used Morse code all the way through. That was the best way we'd found to achieve the communications over that area, over your distances. We did have balloons, helium-filled balloons, which we the officer that first came up, that was one of his things that they said, "Oh, try this." So we would hang a radio off that and put it up over the hill, and we tried VHF communications, voice communications, but it wasn't successful for the fact that it was too noisy. We achieved communications around a lot of the province, which makes it quicker if you can talk on voice, and we did try Morse code over that VHF link, but it wasn't highly successful. The people around the place didn't like Nui Dat being identified really by this big white balloon with orange tail fins and all that floating around. So the army reconnaissance blokes used to go past and shoot it, and shoot this bloody balloon and deny all knowledge, but of course. And they weren't always reliable. Helium was very, very expensive, and of course where they'd shot the balloon, consequently it leaked, and so you'd have to pull it down, patch the hole, put more helium into it, and send it back up. Well, that was the cost was proved quite prohibitive, and anyway, plus one of them did the old, ducked and dived and went boof straight into the hill and destroyed the radios, the cables, and blew itself to pieces. So we did have that replaced, but once again, it's just not a totally reliable. Plus, you couldn't leave them up at night. So the idea of having a VHF communications, you could talk at night if you really needed to. Well, if you couldn't leave the balloon up, defeated the purpose of that. Plus, the reason we couldn't keep it up was if the aircraft were flying around at night. This balloon didn't just go up like a tower, say, where you could mark a tower on a map and you know it's going to be there and you put a red light on it. Well, the old balloon would, move around a bit, so the helicopter people didn't like it, which you could understand. Who wants to fly into one of them at night? Because they used to have to fly at night. And so it died a natural death in the end. But that was one of the experiments. There was quite a few experiments tried.
Yeah, was there another good experiment tried? The balloon's great.
Well, it was fun. I mean, I didn't have a great deal to do with that. We got it towards the end of our tour, and I don't really remember why. I didn't have a thing to do with it. I remember clearing an area for it and digging holes to cement the stays in and that sort of thing, and these hugely expensive bloody bottles of helium. But I don't. And I remember it doing its pull the plug out trick before it speared in, because I thought it was, well, everyone thought it was a hell of a joke. And it was a Sunday, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I do remember that because it had little orange flags all the way up the stay from the ground, and they were still in the bamboo and stuff the second time we went back up there. There was come across orange flags sticking up on the top of the bamboo. The other things that were tried were further up the hill. They put up big deco masts, just single masts for VHF as well, but all that did was help our communications within task force, because we were required to maintain communications with task force headquarters whilst we were in the area. You know, we had to have communications with them, so if we had a stand to, or we were attacked or something, we had to be able to talk to them. But that's really about all it was proved useful for in the end.
Balloon experiment sounds like it was a bit of a morale booster, really, with the...
Well, it was. Everyone, when that first one went in, it was talked about for, well, weeks really, because one of our corporals was so disgusted that we'd be laughing at it, and he couldn't see the funny side of it at all. You shut up, you bastards! That's our communications. You bloody just gone standing there. Oh, sorry, Len. You had to. And then phew, behind your back, or behind his back.
So how long actually was your second tour?
8 months, 9 months. 8 months.
How did you first get word that you could be moving out?
I guess we heard it every day. You had an OC's Officer Commanding's conference, or there was a conference of some sort that the hierarchy would go to, and I think that's when we got told. Said, well, and being, as we said before, the eyes and ears of the task force, if we were winding down, there was no need for us to go out and find anything that they weren't going to go and do anything about. So we were probably one of the first ones to leave, which I wasn't sorry about at all. I was quite happy to pack up and come home.
How much of a relief was it that you wouldn't have to spend the rest of the tour in Vietnam?
Oh, big relief. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I thought, oh, beauty, I've had a guts for it. I suppose I would have put up with the next 4 months, but well, I would have had come home on R&R, I suppose. I might be living on a mountain in Tassie or somewhere. I might have shot through. Wouldn't have had the guts.
Was there any sort of celebration when you found out that you're not going to be there for much longer?
Yeah, I suppose there was bottles of spirits that came out that we weren't allowed to have. If sergeants and above could drink spirits because they could handle spirits, but corporals and below this is another one of these army things. Corporals and below couldn't handle it. So there was an illegal trade in spirits because well, most of the stuff we got from the sergeants, because they couldn't see any sense in this rule either, but it was one of those rules you went along with. And if one of your blokes in the troop wanted a bottle of, I don't know, Bacardi or something, they would supply it.
So all the mystery bottles actually showed their faces?
Yeah, showed fair. They came out from everywhere. Yep. That was another of the... That's another thing that the national servicemen couldn't see.
What?
I mean, you had... Why weren't they allowed to have spirits, just the sergeants? Because, you know, some of them were accountants or teachers, policemen, and there they are, bloody confined to the military system where, because you weren't a sergeant, you couldn't handle it.
I'm a policeman, but I can't have a drink. I can see the strange logic in that.
How did coming home from your second tour compare with the first time you returned home, Creagh?
Well, much different. I was coming home to wife and daughter, and there was no comparison really. And the first time, I said, we flew into Mascot. The second time we came home by Hercules to via Darwin to here. The Eastern States blokes still went home by civilian aircraft, but the Western Australians came home by Hercules, and that was quite interesting because we trucked down to Vung Tau, and then we left there on the Hercules. Well, but the Hercules couldn't pressurise, so we get out over the Gulf of Tonkin or whatever it was, and start to go around like this. And I thought, oh no! And they dropped the back ramp and banged it up again, and dropped it and banged it up again, and finally it turned and headed for Vung Tau. We thought, oh shit, here we go. We spent what money we had, and not that meant anything, I don't suppose, but anyway, they give her one more bloody try. So he did, and it pressurised, and we turned around and everyone breathed a hell of a sigh of relief and headed for Darwin. And Darwin was, Customs gave us a hard time. They went through everything. Blokes had, in those days, reel-to-reel tapes, and because they were top of the wazzer and different things, and they really went through everything. They were pricks, to be quite honest. And anyway, of course, the blokes started to play up then. They thought, well, not putting up with this shit for you pricks. So Customs backed down the finish because they could see the boys weren't really happy about all this attention. And I think we had a feed there and refuelled, I guess, and headed for home. And we landed at Perth Airport. And well, you just, from memory, I think we got paid. Oh, you met your family, got paid, and came home. Well, at that time, our home was across the road, so. And tried to reacquaint yourself with my daughter, who didn't want to know me. She not used to having a father around. Well, not that she knew it was a father, but so that took 4 or 5 days, I suppose, to get through to her. But I used to cart her off, leave Lois here, and cart her off down to Scarborough and put her on my shoulders and go out surfing with her, and just to, I don't know, get her a bit of a feel of something solid under her, I guess. I don't know. And then after, I suppose, a week or so, then you saw friends that hadn't been in Vietnam with you, but well, not the first time, not the second time anyway, but blokes who'd been there the first time, or, you know, friends that you knew, and tried to ease back into civilian life, I suppose. life without Vietnam, I mean. Back into army life was never civvy life.
You mentioned earlier that when you came home, you got into some rows with the likes of Carmen Lawrence.
Oh, that was between tours.
Was it?
Yeah, that was when we would hang out, as I said, in the Swanbourne Hotel or Highway Hotel, I think, was one of the haunts then, if it was going at that stage, or Captain Stirling. I knew all the pubs around the area. And as I said, you would get invited to parties and that, at least two of them. She was there with the uni cronies.
Did you experience any other offensive behaviour from civilians when you completed your second tour?
No, I didn't. We went on a welcome home march through the city, which we led, and then who was the Lord Mayor then? Can't think. Anyway, there was an official function at Council House, which they throw on a feed and drink and what have you. But no, I don't. We never had, to my knowledge, paint thrown at us or any of that sort of thing. I think we got a bit of verbal abuse, but it's probably a bit different because in those days, and probably still now, Perth views SAS as its own, and I don't know whether that's how you feel or not. You're a Western Australian, but in those days, when we used to go out fighting fires, and I think they might have been before the Fremantle riot, but you know, the jail riot and that sort of thing. But you were sort of felt part of the community. You know, if you were in SAS, you were, you know, considered special, I guess. And I think it's the same today, to be quite honest. But you were viewed as Perth's own. No one else had SAS, and therefore you weren't really hassled. I mean, as we said before, you had the odd altercation in the pub, but that happens anywhere. I mean, you don't have to be in the army to experience that.
That's cool. Should we continue, or
Sorry,
should we wait? Or?
I'm rolling.
Ah. So, what kind of community role did you?
Oh well, one of the
provide.
things
Participate in
you
this
did
world,
in those days was when they used to have the Christmas lights in near Council House there. We used to climb up that bloody great pine tree and put the lights in. That was part of our job, was to do that. So, you know, that was, you went and did that, and then they took you off and gave you a few beers and a feed, and then you went back after Christmas and pulled them down. Little things like that, you know, that they thought, oh, well, who climbs? Those SAS blokes climb. Whether you could or not, you went and climbed the bloody tree because you got a feed. But that was that sort of thing, and I'm not sure, as I say, when the riots were at the jail, we were called out to help with that, which is an unusual thing to call out. Aid to the civil power or some bloody thing was invoked in Parliament, and to allow the state to bring in a Commonwealth, because that's what they that's who they turn to, if you like. If the police were having strife, who can help? Army will help. Go and get the SAS blokes, and that's the way it was. I think there's too much red tape nowadays for that sort of thing to occur. Plus, they've got specialised units to do it, the police, which they never did have. And the other thing, also, to later when the counter-terrorist role came in, and the police decided to have their counter-terrorist people, they were trained by us, and got to know quite a few of the police then through being involved in their training and that sort of thing. And you're still still know these blokes, and that's a tie with the community, because the SAS blokes that come over here, you generally, well, in my case, I was here for 14 years, so my kids grew up here. I've had a house here since 1972. You become a part of the community because of the longevity that you spend here, and I'd say the majority of blokes who came over on my CARTA course are still here, and probably most of them, or 2/3 would be from the eastern states, and me as one of them. Then when you come over here, you meet your wife. Most blokes met their wife here, have your kids here, and if you stay 14 years, well, you think it becomes home, because you've grown up here from a 19-year-old snotty-nosed kid to a 40-year-old snotty-nosed kid. But your life is here in the West, and during that 14 years, there's a lot of people got out, and there's hardly a place in Perth you go where you don't run into someone. That's just the way it is, and I think that's why SAS is seen as Perth's own.
How much longer were you involved in the services when you returned from Vietnam?
I got out the end of mid-86, but I effectively finished serving at the end of 85. I filled in that 6 months with leave at half pay and what leave I had and any other thing I could con out of the system, so I didn't have to go back. But I left here in 77, went to the eastern states to a communications regiment for 2.5 years, where I was fortunate enough to get all my higher promotion type courses. Came back here for 3.5 years, back to Melbourne as part of the Signal Squadron with the Commando Regiment. And then that was me finished. My next move was back to a static communications place, which I knew nothing about and didn't want to know anything about. I'd done the courses, but a course qualifies you to be able to do something. It doesn't give you experience, and I had no experience in that sort of thing. And they offered me a captaincy, and I thought, well, my eldest daughter's 14, 15. If I stay on, I'll have to stay at least 3 years. Well, that puts her 18. She'll be tied to the place, so I took the selfish way out and said, no, thanks, I'll come back here. So I came back here and got out that way. I'd seen too many people stay on, plus I'd run out of interest, really. I'd done everything I could possibly do. I'd passed on my expertise to the young fellas, and it's up to the young fellas to pick up the baton and carry it. I was 40, I think, and whilst that's not old, it's not young for a Special Forces soldier to be able to expected to do your 9 milers and your 2 milers, and I was breaking down, got to the stage where I was swimming instead of running around, and gym work instead of running around. So I thought, no, the writing's on the wall. You wouldn't be happy anywhere else, and so we packed up and came back here, came home.
Can you just perhaps expand a little bit on how you passed on your knowledge to the younger blokes?
Well, what you've learned over the years, I became an instructor on the courses here, the different signals type courses, for both our signals people plus the regimental infantry signallers. Went on the CARTA courses with they changed the name, but however, we'll stick with CARTA. Went on those courses and trained the young people coming through. When I went to Melbourne, it was sort of a different scenario, but basically taught patrolling to those young people over there that never had any idea of it, and I think in the meantime I mentioned before that I was the one way to cure myself of being scared of parachuting was go and take it up at a higher level, which, whilst certainly not a really high level, it was something that I could instill a bit of confidence into the young blokes with regard to it. It was to some degree considered it was something you had to do. It didn't have to. It wasn't fun. And I thought, well, that's the wrong approach. You know, I was brought up with that. I thought, well, you're better off with a smile on your face when you shove someone out the door, even though he's scared. You shove him out with a smile on his face. He'll see you smiling, or when you're checking him in the plane, he'll see you smiling and poking him and fiddling around and making sure he's right. And he gets a little bit of confidence, or he thinks you're a lunatic, one of the two. And I found that was the way to, whilst the blokes still didn't like it, they would do it. They would follow me, and it sort of, this is a big noting. If we were, you had to stick as a group of parachutists, be they 5 or bloody 50. I had a lot of blokes would hate going parachuting. They knew they had to do it, so they would try and get in my stick, so that you know, they would feel a bit more confident about who was either throwing them out the door or was jumping out in front of them, and they would feel a bit more confident about following on. That's passing something on that you've learned over a period of, say, 20 years. You don't have to pass on book knowledge or as such. If you pass on something that gives them a bit of confidence, something that later on they'll say, well, that wasn't that bloody hard, I don't suppose. And next time they do it, they'll be a little bit more relaxed. And I would give them an opportunity to, in the plane, you're supposed to check them, and I would just say, all I'm going to do this time is, when I give that, you'll stand up, hook on, go through all your drills by yourselves. I'll come along and make sure you're hooked on and everything's all right, but I'm not going to do any more than that. Because the army system used to go through, you had to yell out this and yell out that and bloody count this and count that, and I never saw a great deal of bloody need for that either. Once you've done it a few times, and I would make sure these blokes are competent. You know, I wouldn't do it with a novice, but give these blokes that little bit of confidence, that you had confidence in them to do something. And then you got paid back. Later on, life blokes come up, shit, I remember such and such when we jumped into Lavitt, and, you know, wasn't that good? And say, well, you've passed something on. And that was my way of doing it. Once you've passed on what you can to the people you've got, it's time to let the young fellas come through, because they can do it better than you.
What relationship do you have with those young fellas in the SAS today, Craig?
I still see a few of them, but it's all because I was Possum there all the time. So, oh, Possum, how you going? I haven't seen you for a while. How's things? And one bloke's just become a father. So I dropped off a present the other day, and they get on the phone. Oh, thanks for that. That's bloody good. Didn't expect that. And you know, you see them Anzac Day, and they come up and say, I remember when you took us to such and such, and we did this. And makes me feel good that I passed on knowledge that I had to them, and but they, you know, still remember it and got something out of it. Because otherwise, it's not much point existing if you can't help someone out, you know, with something you know.
Are those values that have been instilled in you by the SAS?
To a degree, I suppose, yeah. Well, it's things you pick up as you go along, I suppose, but to a degree, yeah. I suppose that first bloke I ever mentioned, Chris Jennison, he his attitude was not to, you didn't have to yell and scream to pass on a point. And what you had to do is make sure that what you tell someone is right. Because if you get caught out spinning a yarn, well then you're caught out forever, especially in a place like Swanbourne, because it doesn't take long to whiz around. They say, oh, that bloody Bramley, he was a bloody cockhead. He said this, and it's not at all. So then they talk about that in the boozer, so it's around the boozer and around the place in no time. So you've got to make sure what you tell them is right, and that you can back up what you do teach them. So, yes.
So it's about being real.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, however you want to put it. That's right, yeah, being real, I guess. Yeah, being genuine, I suppose, in your approach, and I think it helps if you like people, which I like people. I didn't see a rank structure as being any impediment or something of actually talking to the young blokes, and you just expect a certain amount of inherited respect that your rank should have, but by the same token, I believe that rank doesn't necessarily give you that respect. That's something that you've got to have got to know your job, and you don't have to earn their respect, as in, you know, jumping up and performing in front of these young fellas. A lot of it is hearsay. That, you know, your reputation goes before you, as they say. And in an army such as ours, there's a lot of people know a lot of people, so that always helps. So if you've been honest, and this is getting into a moral sort of thing, isn't it, really? If you've been honest and fairly good along the way, people will know about it. And if you're a bullshit artist, they'll know even quicker. That's one thing in the army, well, service person, they can spot a bullshit artist bloody 100 miles away.
Do you think that rank in, say, the Australian forces is different than in some foreign forces, in terms of the relationship that high-ranking officers may have with subordinate?
Yes, I do. For instance, when we were in Vietnam the first time, we had troop commanders were second lieutenants, which, you know, they were straight out of, they learnt how to be an officer and march in a straight line with a sword, and not a great deal else. We had a particular bloke, Ron Dempsey. I went out with him to that fire support base Coral that they mention quite often, but we weren't there when the shit hit the fan, so to speak. But we were there, and our job was to provide communications for our patrols which are in the area, and it turned out we couldn't do it. We couldn't put up the antennas, and it just wasn't going to be a viable thing, so we were pulled out. But while we were there, we were expected to dig a shell scrape, or, you know, to keep out the road of mortars, and of course we didn't even possess shovels. And when we went out there, we were in greens. Well, I had no rank, and he had his single pip on his shoulder, and we borrowed a shovel, and I was doing the communications, he was digging the hole. And you could see people come past and look and say, well, you know, wonder who that other bloke is. I must have been off higher rank than the second lieutenant. Second lieutenants didn't dig holes, but in our setup, that was what we were there to do. So he dug the hole, and I met him later on in life. We were coming back from I don't know where I'd been, but I was with my brother, and he was a sergeant at the time, I think. And anyway, we were going out to get on an aircraft, and this bloke yelled out, "Possum!" And it was Ron Dempsey, who was then a lieutenant colonel, and I think I was a warrant officer then. Not sure. Yeah, it must have been. Anyway, I sort of turned round and I said, God, how you going? We shook hands. No saluting. And you could see my brother sort of jaw dropped. You don't do this to a lieutenant colonel. And I never gave it a thought, and neither did he. We just hadn't seen each other since 1968 or 1969 or whatever. And it was sort of a natural reaction to shake hands, and you could see these other people around us looking, and what's that bloody warrant officer doing with that colonel, you know? And he didn't care, and I didn't. That's the sort of relationship you have, I guess. Whether that's answered your question or not, I don't know. But
well, what do you think that says about us as Australian people?
in our case, sort of from a Special Forces perspective, I suppose mutual respect. Because at the time when he was a second lieutenant, I was a baggy-ass SIG, you know, private. Couldn't get much further down the ladder. But you went and worked together, and you knew each other's. You got to know each other's capabilities. You weren't, whilst he was in charge, you weren't necessarily a total incompetent. You know, you'd been through the CARDA course, if you like, and you could both do the same basic SAS course to get into SAS. So, whilst he was the second lieutenant, you'd still worked your guts out on these courses, and the same on the parachute course, and you're both probably as scared as each other. Because you're a second lieutenant doesn't mean you're not scared. Now I've lost my train of thought to your question now.
That's right, but is what you're describing in terms of your experiences, do you think it's something that only exists because you know, we're discussing your service in Australian forces? Do you think it's an Australian characteristic, or?
Yes, I do, because the relation to what I've seen of the POMs in their normal run-of-the-mill army, everything's there's a rank structure and a social structure, if you like. Amongst their SAS, I don't think it's the same. I think it's pretty similar to ours. And I think Special Forces with the Americans, it's similar to ours as well. But their actual normal army, if you like, it's a rank structured type of organisation. Now, I don't think it's specific to us. I think it's probably specific to our army to a bigger degree than it is to the other two that I can really comment on. I think the Kiwi army is probably fairly rank structured, from what I remember.
So do you think it's a case of good old Aussie mateship?
I'm only going to comment to when I got out, and probably a little bit later, because I don't know what goes on in the army now. It's become corporatised, really, so I can't comment on that. But yes, I think it is. But I also think that mateship thing is being phased out to a big degree, because prior to, say, Timor, or we really didn't have a big commitment anywhere, and we became corporatised. In as much as the CO of a battalion or something is responsible now for his own bag of gold. So he then has to have officers under him who can dish that money out and money manage. Whereas before, you bid X amount of dollars for an exercise, and you just went and did your exercise, and your rations and all that just turned up because that's what you ordered. But now you've got to manage that battalion like a bloody corporate, which I don't think is right. No matter what happens, an army is not a civilian organisation. For instance, the cooks are civilians. As soon as they went to go to Timor, the cook said, well, I'm not going up there. So the army got rid of most of their cooks, whereas prior to that, each unit had their own cooks. So in the end, they said, or the army said, well, you got to go. I said, well, you stick it up your arse, I'm not going. I'm a civilian. We'll go if you give us more money. And whacked on, you know, a big heap. Now, I don't think they finished up going. They scraped around the army and got army cooks to go up there. But that was a sort of a bit of a wake-up call to, hello, we've made this a success at this corporate sort of thing, and it's fine, but it won't work with military. Same as civilian security people. So now if we go away somewhere, our blokes have got to do their own security or take army security or service security because we've all got civvies.
How do you think that sort of corporate attitude may affect the individual SAS soldier in his training and his approach to his work?
No, I don't think it affects them at all. Not from what I've seen, and I see we have quite a lot to do with the SAS blokes in as much as I'm in Legacy and we run a camp down at Bustleton every first couple of weeks in January for the Legacy kids, and we get a terrific amount of support from the SAS regiment. It's something that I don't think the civilian population is quite aware of how good they are to us. And the blokes you see down there are switched on. They're well better than what we were. They're better trained, better equipped, more switched on to the world around them than we were. Like we were saying before, what do I know about Vietnam? Zip. They know where they're going. If they're going into Afghanistan or Iraq, they get right down to the digger. They get much better briefings than us, much better information available to them. They sort of really know what they're about. So no, it hasn't affected them, I don't think.
That's reassuring.
Mind you, I'm biased. No, I honestly mean that though. They're pretty switched on bunch of blokes.
What does Anzac Day mean to you?
I speak and quote all the cliches, I suppose, about.
Has it
That's a
changed
debate
over the years?
It's much better over now. I think there's a lot more people, lot more young people seem to know about it and are willing to turn up, come and watch people march, and I don't know. They're probably more aware of it, I suppose. But I don't think that's necessarily something that was pushed through the schools. I know it is now. Each school must have an Anzac service, which I think current Premier brought in, which I think is a good thing, because a lot of schools didn't do it. And here I'm going to harp back to Carmen Lawrence. You know, if you got someone like her in the school, she says, "Oh, I don't believe in it. It's all bullshit." She has the power, or they have the power to not have an Anzac service, so that detracts. It stops those kids that want to have it from having it. So it's like saying we won't sing the national anthem because it might upset the bloody Muslims. Or whatever. You should have that in the schools, and they are having that, and I think maybe that's got a flow-on effect to what we see in the streets. But it's, to me, that's a chance to meet blokes I haven't seen for a lot of years. I enjoy the day because you find out what they've done over those years. it's a mateship thing. You know, I don't necessarily. It's called Anzac Day, but it could be called anything. It just started from. I had to start from somewhere, and I suppose that's where it started from. But to me, it's a mateship thing. And I take my family. It's a way to teach them. They've been going ever since they were old enough to go, from riding the pusher, pram, whatever you want to call it. Pusher's an old term. So, and my grandkids now go as well, regardless of whether it's raining or it's bloody 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning when they got to get up. They don't complain. They go along. My 2 granddaughters led the legacy in this year's parade here in Perth, and I marched with my grandson, which I was quite proud of because he's 15 and stands over here. You know, I was quite proud marching with him. So that's sort of a family thing initially with the dawn service, and then later on after the march. But that's also a family thing, I suppose. But after the march, then us old farts get to go and do our thing, and the family does theirs, I guess.
And what do you go and do?
I generally go back to Swanbourne and well, drink and talk and talk and talk. And it used to be drink and talk, but now it's a fair bit of talk and not much drinking. But and blokes turn up. I only go there. I'm a member of the association, have been since it started, whenever that was. But I only go there twice a year for sure, and that's one's Anzac Day and one's the regimental birthday. The others, if I get there, well, it's a bonus. But I find a lot of blokes are the same, and they're quite happy to go on Anzac Day, and you as I say, it's a mateship thing. You find out what your mates have been doing, who's crook, who's not crook, where they are. It's a catch-up type day. Because even if you live in the same city, you don't necessarily must pick up the phone and talk to such and such, but you don't. So if you see them face to face, well then that's a good thing.
So what do you think of this growing popularity of Anzac Day? More and more people coming along.
I think it's a good thing.
What do you think it means?
Well, I think probably people are probably looking for a national identity, I suppose, without analysing things too much. I think we need a national identity, and we really haven't got one. And but I think that's what people are doing. They're saying, well, where are we in the scheme of things? We're probably the only nation that supports that celebrates a defeat. But really, is that what Anzac Day is all about? It was just pick that day, all right. We'll pick a day, and I don't think it necessarily celebrates a defeat. I think it's a day we've picked. We could pick Australia Day. I don't think it matters.
Maybe it's the character shown in the face of defeat.
Well, probably, because, yeah, that's right. I hadn't thought about that, but yes, I suppose it is. It does. You don't have to win everything, do you? Without showing character, you can be an honourable loser if you like. But that doesn't mean you haven't got in and give it your best shot. And I think without the Pommy influence on that, we would have won.
Well, Creagh, I'd just like to thank you for being a good character today and spending the day with us and recording your experiences for the archive. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Julian and Denise, appreciate it.
You're welcome.